The night is quiet now, and you are invited to rest. Imagine yourself lying beneath a sky woven with countless stars, the same sky the Maya once gazed upon with reverence and awe. Their world was filled with sacred rhythms, cycles of sun and shadow, of life and afterlife, patterns they believed stretched far beyond the visible. As your mind softens, you are invited into their cosmic dream, where every life is part of an eternal journey. This story will not rush you. Like a river flowing gently to the sea, we will drift together into the heart of Mayan beliefs. You will learn of their gods, their rituals, their understanding of death, and the serene order they found in the great beyond. Allow each word to carry you deeper into rest, into reflection, into quiet companionship with the ancient soul of the Maya. Chapter 1: The Eternal Cycles of the Mayan. Cosmoster, ancient Maya, believed that time was not a straight road, moving forward into the unknown, but a circle, endlessly repeating. To them, existence unfolded in cycles, where beginnings and endings were never separate, but part of the same rhythm. Just as the sun rises, sets, and rises again, the Maya imagined the universe moving through great spirals of renewal. At the heart of this worldview was their calendar system, one of the most complex and precise in the ancient world. Modern people often picture a calendar as a simple list of days, but for the Maya, the calendar was something far more profound. It was not only a way to keep track of planting seasons or ritual festivals. It was a sacred text in motion, a map of the soul's place within the cosmos. Every cycle of days carried meaning, shaping both the fate of individuals and the destiny of kingdoms. The Maya actually maintained several calendars at once, each with its own purpose. The Tzolk'in, a 260-day ritual calendar, guided religious ceremonies, divination, and the timing of spiritual events. The Hob, a 365-day solar calendar, structured the agricultural year, and together, these two calendars formed what is called the calendar round, a repeating cycle of 52 years. To the Maya, this was not just a measure of time. It was a sacred turning of the wheel. When the universe itself was believed to renew, the sacredness of the 52-year cycle carried a quiet weight. For the Maya, a human lifetime often fit neatly within this span. To reach the turning of the cycle was to witness renewal, to stand at the threshold where time itself seemed to fold and begin again. At these moments, great rituals were performed, for they carried the reassurance that creation continued, that the balance of the world was still intact, beyond these shorter cycles. The Maya also measured vast spans of cosmic history using the long count calendar. This system tracked days in great numbers, allowing them to calculate the unfolding of ages. One of its most famous dates is August 11th, 3114 BCE, which the Maya considered the beginning of the current world age. This was not the first creation, they believed, but one in a series. Previous worlds had risen and fallen, destroyed by floods, darkness, or other cosmic upheaval. Each ending, however, was followed by a new beginning. To the Maya, even the universe itself lived within the eternal rhythm of birth, death, and rebirth. This way of thinking carried a gentle comfort. Nothing was ever lost forever. Just as the maize plant died in harvest and returned as seed, so too did human beings move within these sacred cycles. Death was not final, but a passage toward renewal. Time itself was the great reassurance, promising that what ended would return in another form. It is easy to imagine how this view shaped daily life. Farmers looked to the calendar for when to plant maize, knowing their work was tied to cosmic order. Priests read the sacred days as messages from the gods, seeing patterns in the cycles that could guide communities. Kings aligned their rule with these rhythms, performing rituals at precise moments to demonstrate their harmony with the eternal order. Life was not random. It was woven into patterns that echoed across seasons, generations, and ages. The calendar also touched the deeply personal. Each person was born under a particular day sign, a combination of numbers and symbols that carried spiritual meaning. These signs were not simply superstitions, but guides to character, destiny, and the challenges a soul might face. To be born on one day meant you carried the energy of the jaguar, stealthy and powerful. Another day might tie you to the maize plant, nurturing and renewing. In this way, each human life was inscribed within the cosmic cycles from its first breath. And yet, there is something more subtle in this worldview. The Maya did not see cycles as perfectly gentle. Within their patterns was both order and fragility. When rituals were neglected or when harmony was broken, cycles could falter. Droughts, famine, or war were not merely natural disasters. There were signs that the balance of time was unsettled. Through careful offerings, ceremonies, and the keeping of sacred order, the Maya sought to keep the cycles steady. In their eyes, human life carried responsibility for the turning of the universe itself. Reflecting on this belief, one can feel both awe and stillness. Imagine the comfort of living within a system where nothing is wasted, where every loss is temporary, and where every end is simply the beginning of another round. And yet imagine, too, the quiet burden, the awareness that human choices mattered, that neglect or forgetfulness could disturb the harmony of the whole. Modern people often see time as something rushing forward, never to be repeated. Days slip past, never returning. But for the Maya, every moment was connected to past and future, a spiral turning upon itself. In their rituals, they honored this eternal motion, lighting fires, offering incense, and watching the stars move across the sky. In each flicker of flame and each turning of the heavens, they saw proof that cycles endure. The Maya world was filled with reminders of this truth. The rising and setting of Venus, a planet they tracked with astonishing precision, marked the rhythm of war and peace. The phases of the moon shaped ceremonies of fertility and renewal. The sun's passage defined the agricultural year, tying harvest and ritual into one breath. Everywhere they looked, the universe whispered of cycles eternal. To rest in this belief is to find comfort in continuity. Your own life, too, becomes part of a rhythm far larger than yourself. Every change, every loss, carries the seed of renewal. Nothing ends without something beginning again. For the Maya, this was not abstract philosophy. It was lived truth, visible in the soil, in the stars, in the slow heartbeat of time itself. As the night deepens, you may feel the gentle calm of their vision. Time does not rush past you, leaving you behind. Instead, it circles back, weaving you into its endless fabric. Like the turning of seasons, like the rising of the sun, your life too belongs to the eternal cycle. And so the Maya rested in the reassurance that nothing truly ends. The world turns, the stars return, and the soul continues on its journey. In the silence of their temples, beneath the endless sky, they knew that all things move within cycles eternal. Chapter 2: Death as Passage, not ending for the Maya. Death was never seen as a sudden halt. It was not a curtain falling, nor a final extinguishing of breath. Instead, it was imagined as a passage, a transition from one form of life into another. In their worldview, existence was never broken. It was continuous, unfolding in patterns that carried the soul through stages of transformation. Death, in this way, was a threshold, not an end. The Maya often described this passage as a kind of crossing. Just as one moves from one chamber into another, or from sunlight into shadow, so too did the soul step from the earthly world into realms beyond. Waiting there were ancestors, guardians, and gods, ready to receive those who entered. For the living, this offered reassurance. Death was not abandonment. It was a return, a reunion with those who had already walked the path before. This belief was rooted in a cosmology where the afterlife was layered and complex. The Maya spoke of Xibalba, the underworld ruled by powerful deities. It was not a place of eternal punishment, nor purely of peace, but rather a space of testing and transformation. The soul's journey through Xibalba involved trials, challenges that reflected both the hardships of life and the lessons of spiritual growth. In this way, the afterlife mirrored the living world, carrying both hardship and promise to the Maya. The process of dying was deeply intertwined with ritual. Burial was not simply disposal of the body, but preparation for a sacred journey. The dead were often buried with offerings, maize kernels to sustain the soul, water to quench its thirst, jade beads as symbols of breath and life. These gifts were not symbolic alone. They were practical, imagined as supplies for the journey that awaited. In this way, the living cared for the dead as travelers, sending them forward with what they might need. Anthropologists have uncovered tombs where rulers were laid to rest with rich treasures, jade masks, carved obsidian, painted ceramics. These were not displays of wealth, but reminders of continuity. The ruler, now gone, was still part of the cosmic cycle. His body returned to the earth, his spirit entered the realm of ancestors, and his memory guided the living. Even common burials, with simple tokens of food and water, reflected the same belief that death was movement, not ending. The Maya also held that the manner of one's death could shape the soul's path. Those who died in battle, in childbirth, or through sacrifice were believed to bypass the long trials of Xibalba. Instead, they were honored as sacred, their souls lifted swiftly into celestial realms. In this belief, death was not a single experience. It was many, each pathway shaped by destiny and circumstance. Some souls faced trials in shadowed halls. Others soared directly to luminous heavens. This variety reminds us how flexible their vision of the afterlife was. It was not confined to a single destination or judgment. Instead, it reflected a balance of cosmic order, where every life met a fitting passage. In this balance was a certain serenity. The Maya did not live with the dread of eternal condemnation, as found in some later traditions. Rather, they lived with the awareness that death opened a door into a space that was challenging but also transformative. Filled with both shadows and light. To reflect on this belief is to notice its gentle wisdom. Imagine living with the understanding that your last breath is not a disappearance, but a step into a new place where ancestors await. Imagine knowing that your burial gifts are not empty symbols, but real provisions, like bread and water packed for a long journey. Such thoughts ease the fear of death, turning it into something natural, even expected. The Maya also saw the soul's journey as part of cosmic reciprocity. Just as the living made offerings to the gods, so too did the dead continue to influence the world of the living. Ancestors could guide, protect, or warn their descendants. Families kept this bond alive through rituals, prayers, and remembrance. To die, then, was not to vanish but to shift roles from living participant to ancestral presence. The relationship endured, soft as breath, carried across generations. Still, the Maya did not deny that the afterlife involved challenge. Stories from their mythology describe souls facing trials in Xibalba, houses of darkness, houses of cold, rivers of blood, games against the lords of death. These were not meant to terrify, but to teach. Life itself was full of hardship, and so too was the afterlife. To pass through was to be tested, and through testing, to be renewed. The end result was not endless suffering, but a deeper integration into the eternal cycle. The imagery of these trials, though sometimes severe, carried a kind of spiritual calm, for even in the house of darkness there was still light beyond. Even in the rivers of trial there was still emergence. Nothing was permanent, not even hardship. The journey was transformative, not final. This layered understanding of death resonates with something deeply human. Many cultures fear death, shaping stories of judgment or punishment. But the Maya framed death as movement, as a crossing into another stage. There was challenge, but also continuation. There was mystery, but also reassurance. Their afterlife was not free of difficulty, yet it promised that the soul remained, enduring beyond the grave. To imagine death in this way is to feel a sense of balance. You may rest in the thought that endings are not abrupt voids, but doorways. You may consider that your story, too, could continue in ways unseen, carried forward into another realm, another cycle. The Maya lived with this awareness woven into their daily rituals. Each death was accompanied by care, each burial by gifts, each ancestor by prayer. The gentle truth at the heart of their belief is that nothing is wasted. Life flows into death, and death into renewal. The passage may be shadowed, but it leads onward into continuity. In this vision, fear softens, loss becomes change, death becomes passage, not ending. And so, in the quiet of their temples and in the silence of their tombs, the Maya held to a serene conviction that every soul, when it departs, steps softly into another chamber of existence, where the story continues. Chapter 3: The 9 Layers of Xibalba. The Mayan underworld, then the worldview of the ancient Maya. Beneath the surface of the earth stretched a realm known as Xibalba. This was the underworld, a place of shadows and trials, imagined not as a void of despair, but as a necessary stage in the soul's journey. It was here that the dead would travel after leaving the world of the living. Their path was not easy, but it was purposeful. Each stage of descent offered lessons, cleansing, and transformation. Xibalba was described as having 9 layers, or levels, each representing a deeper step into challenge and renewal. The number 9 itself carried meaning in Maya thought. Just as the heavens were layered above in 13 tiers, the underworld was structured below in 9. Together, they reflected the balance of dualities, light and darkness, life and death, ascent and descent. In this cosmic symmetry, nothing stood alone. Each side of existence mirrored the other. The journey into Xibalba began at the moment of death. The soul was believed to travel downward, entering through caves, rivers, or openings in the earth. Caves in particular were seen as sacred portals, their cool air and darkness embodying the threshold between worlds. Archaeological evidence shows that the Maya conducted rituals deep inside caves, leaving offerings of pottery, incense, and even blood. These acts were not only for the gods, but also for guiding the souls that would pass through. The first layers of Xibalba tested the soul with disorientation and fear. There were rivers said to be filled with blood, and others filled with scorpions or pus. There were crossroads where travelers could be tricked into taking the wrong path. These images might sound grim to modern ears, but they were not meant as cruel punishments. Instead, they reflected the challenges of leaving behind the attachments of life. To cross these rivers, the soul had to let go of fear, pride, and the illusions of earthly existence. Deeper within, the journey became more complex. The Maya spoke of houses of trial, places within Xibalba that tested the spirit in different ways. One was the house of darkness, where no light could guide the traveler. Another was the house of cold, filled with freezing winds. There was the house of jaguars, echoing with the growls of sacred predators, and the house of bats, where sharp wings and cries filled the air. Each house represented not only a danger, but also a lesson. Darkness taught resilience. Cold demanded endurance. The jaguars embodied courage, while the bats symbolized transformation. The ninth and deepest layer of Xibalba was the most mysterious. Here, the soul confronted the lords of the underworld themselves. Known collectively as the Lords of Death, they presided over sickness, pain, and misfortune. Yet they were not seen as purely malevolent. Instead, they were guardians of balance, ensuring that no soul entered the afterlife unchanged. To meet them was to face the truth of mortality and to emerge transformed. What is striking is that the Maya did not imagine these trials as eternal. The soul's passage through Xibalba was not endless suffering, but a process. It was closer to initiation, a series of tests that stripped away what was unnecessary and prepared the spirit for renewal. Just as crops must be burned or seeds buried before new growth can rise, so too did the soul need to pass through darkness before it could find light. Archaeologists studying Maya inscriptions and texts, such as the Popol Vuh, have pieced together these beliefs with care. The Popol Vuh, a sacred Cache Maya text, describes in vivid detail the descent of the hero twins into Xibalba. Their trials echoed the challenges awaiting all souls, but with mythic resonance. Through cleverness and endurance, they overcame the Lords of Death, setting an example of courage and transformation. Their story suggests that Xibalba was not meant to destroy, but to shape and renew. Even in their rituals, the Maya carried echoes of these layers. Offerings of blood or incense represented the surrender of earthly vitality to the gods of the underworld. Ceremonies performed at night often acknowledged the presence of unseen forces. The underworld was never entirely distant. It touched the living world through caves, shadows, sickness, and dreams. To the Maya, life and death were never fully separated. The 9 layers of Xibalba were not only a map for the dead, but also a mirror of the trials faced by the living. Reflecting on these beliefs invites a quiet sense of humility. Imagine a worldview where descent into shadow is not failure but necessity. The darkness is not final. It is a stage, a cleansing step before renewal. For the Maya to die was to travel downward into roots of the earth, just as a seed is pressed into soil. Only through that descent could new life emerge. There is something comforting in this vision. The 9 layers of Xibalba may sound daunting, yet they are stages of preparation, not endless torment. Each trial is part of a larger rhythm, a cosmic balance where even death serves life. Perhaps, in this way, the Maya found serenity in their belief. They accepted death not as punishment but as passage, knowing that through its layers, the soul would eventually return to harmony. And so the 9 layers of Xibalba remain not only a story of challenge, but also of transformation. Beneath the earth, in those imagined halls of darkness and trial, the Maya placed their hope that every soul could endure, be tested, and emerge renewed. In this vision lies a quiet truth, that even in descent there is purpose. Even in shadow there is preparation for light. Chapter 4. Lords of Xibalba, Masters of Trial and Shadow in the imagination of the ancient Maya. Xibalba was not an empty realm. It was alive with presence, ruled by powerful beings known as the Lords of Death. To hear their titles today may sound unsettling, gods of pain, sickness, and trickery. But to the Maya, these lords were not demons in the sense of pure evil. They were guardians of balance. Their purpose was to test the human soul, to reveal weakness, and to shape resilience. The Popol Vuh, the great sacred text of the Keish Maya, gives us much of what we know about them. It describes a court of rulers who presided over the trials of the underworld. They sat in judgment, each embodying a force of suffering that mortals had to face. Death, after all, was not simply an end but a passage through difficulty. And these lords ensured that the passage was neither casual nor careless. At the head of Xibalba were 1 Death and 7 Death, the chief rulers. Their names alone reveal something of the Maya view of mortality. Death was not singular. It came in forms, in layers, in stages. 1 Death and 7 Death presided over this truth, commanding the other lords who enforced the challenges of the underworld. Among them were figures like Scabstripe and Pussmaster, who embodied sickness and disease. Their presence reflected the reality of human life, where illness often marked the transition toward death. To encounter them was to face the fragility of the body, to accept the limits of flesh. There were also Bone Scepter and Skull Scepter, who ruled over decay and the inevitability of mortality. Their names remind us that death is not only a moment, but also a process, the gradual return of the body to the earth. To the Maya, this was not grotesque. It was the natural cycle, a truth that could not be denied. Other lords dealt in trickery and humiliation. Lord of Filth and Lord of Woe mocked travelers, covering them in shame or sorrow. Their role was not cruelty for its own sake, but a test of dignity. Could the soul remain steady even when dishonored? Could it hold to its essence despite ridicule? The Popol Vuh also describes lords who wielded forces of sudden harm. Blood Gatherer and Blood Drinker fed upon human vitality, reminding the soul that life force was always a temporary gift. To confront them was to accept that nothing of the body could be carried forward into eternity. It is easy for modern readers to view these lords through the lens of fear, yet the Maya saw them with more nuance. They were harsh, yes, but necessary. Just as crops require both sun and rain, the soul required both ease and trial. Without challenge, growth would be incomplete. Without shadow, light could not be fully understood. This understanding is woven deeply into Maya ritual life. The presence of these lords was acknowledged in ceremonies of offering and sacrifice. Bloodletting rites, in which rulers or priests would pierce their skin to offer drops of blood, were acts of respect toward both the gods of the heavens and the lords of the underworld. Such offerings acknowledged that human vitality was not owned, but borrowed and must sometimes be given back. The lords of Xibalba also played a role in the mythic journey of the hero twins, Hunop and Xibalba. Summoned into the underworld, the twins faced the Lord's tests, houses filled with darkness, knives, jaguars, and fire. They were mocked, deceived, and challenged. Yet through cleverness and persistence, they overcame the lords, even turning the trials back upon them. Their triumph was not the destruction of death, but the transformation of it. The myth shows that death could be endured and transcended, but never denied. When the Maya told these stories, they were not simply speaking of distant gods. They were reflecting on the human experience itself. Sickness, shame, fear, and loss are part of every life. The lords of Xibalba personified these struggles, giving form to forces that might otherwise feel chaotic and meaningless. By naming them, the Maya made them part of the cosmic order. Archaeologists studying Maya art have found depictions of skeletal gods, often shown with jewelry, crowns, and symbols of power. These images were not meant to terrify, but to remind the living of the ever-present reality of death. To live in the Maya world was to live with awareness of mortality at every turn. The lords were feared, yes, but they were also respected, for they kept the balance of existence intact. If one pauses to reflect, there is a quiet wisdom here. The lords of Xibalba were embodiments of trial, yet their role was not endless punishment. They did not keep souls trapped forever in misery. They tested, they stripped away illusions, and they demanded humility. Only through their challenges could a soul be made ready for renewal. This perspective softens the image of shadow. The lords of sickness and sorrow remind us that pain, though unwelcome, often teaches resilience. The lords of shame remind us that dignity rests not in outward honor but in inner steadiness. The lords of decay remind us that the body is not the final self, but only a vessel for a time. In each shadowed figure lies a difficult truth, and in each truth lies a form of preparation. The Maya accepted this with remarkable grace. For them, the lords of Xibalba were not enemies to be hated, but teachers to be endured. They were reminders that the journey of the soul was not simple or easy. It was shaped, refined, and made whole only by passing through shadow in this way. The Maya vision of the underworld offers a quiet lesson for us as well. The figures we fear may not always be our destroyers. Sometimes they are the ones who strip away what we cannot carry, leaving us lighter, clearer, and more ready for what lies beyond. So the lords remain in memory, rulers of pain and shadow, yet guardians of balance. They sit in the court of Xibalba, not as eternal tormentors, but as necessary gatekeepers. Through them, every soul must pass, and in their presence, the Maya found not only fear, but also humility and even strength. What does it mean, then, that the path to renewal lies through the hands of such figures? Could it be that in the very heart of suffering lives the seed of transformation? The Maya seem to believe so, and in their vision we may find a quiet comfort that even in the realm of shadows, balance holds. Chapter 5. The Sacred Ball Game of the Afterlife. In the world of the ancient Maya, the ball game was far more than a pastime. Known as pits in their language, it carried meanings that reached into religion, myth, and the very structure of the cosmos. Courts for the game have been discovered at nearly every major Maya site. From Copan to Chichen Itza, their stone outlines standing silent even today. The game was played with a heavy rubber ball, struck by hips, elbows, or knees, moving back and forth across the court with rhythm and weight. To watch the game was not to witness mere sport. It was to see the dance of life and death, creation and destruction, balance and imbalance. The ball game held a place in Maya mythology that few activities could match. In the Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Keish Maya, the hero twins, Hunop and Xibalba, descend to Xibalba, summoned by the Lords of Death to face a series of trials. Among these trials was the ball game. The Lords demanded that the twins compete, hoping to defeat them, humiliate them, and ultimately destroy them. Yet the game was more than a contest of skill. It symbolized the struggle of light against shadow, the cycle of the sun's descent and return, the eternal rhythm that the Maya believed moved through all existence. Archaeological findings support the importance of this belief. Courts were often aligned with celestial bodies, linking the movements of the ball with the movement of the stars and planets. The bouncing of the rubber sphere was not simply physical play. It was a reenactment of cosmic forces. Some scholars suggest that the sound of the ball striking stone walls was understood as an echo of thunder or heartbeat, the pulse of the world itself. But in myth, the ball game carried even deeper resonance. The father and uncle of the hero twins, Hunhunop and Vukubhunop, had once played the same game in the world above. Their playing disturbed the lords of Xibalba, who called them down into the underworld. There they were defeated, killed, and buried. From the head of Hunhunop, however, life emerged. His skull, placed in a tree, spat into the hand of a maiden, impregnating her. From this miraculous act, the hero twins were born. In this cycle, the ball game was not only a sport, but a stage where death itself gave way to rebirth. To play the ball game was to participate in this cosmic rhythm. In the courts of stone, beneath the watching eyes of rulers, priests, and communities, the players carried out acts of deep spiritual meaning. Some games were linked to ritual sacrifice. Captives of war might be forced to play, their defeat leading to their offering as a blood payment to the gods. At other times, games were played to settle disputes, to honor the gods, or to mirror the struggles described in myth. The imagery of the ball game often linked it directly to the underworld. Relief carvings at sites like Chichen Itza show decapitated players with streams of serpents or plants flowing from their necks. This was not mere violence, but symbolism. From death comes life, from loss comes renewal. The court was itself a threshold space, a bridge between the living and the divine. To understand the Maya ball game, one must see it as layered. On the surface, it was a contest of endurance and strength. Beneath that, it was a political performance, a display of power and authority. And beneath even that, it was a reenactment of sacred time, a reminder to all who watched and played that they were caught in the same cycle as the hero twins, the same eternal contest between shadow and light. Imagine, for a moment, the game in play. The ball, heavy with rubber, strikes the court with a dull sound. The players twist and throw their bodies to keep it in motion. The crowd watches, not with the nervous energy of modern sport, but with reverence, as though each strike carries cosmic weight. The ball arcs through space, like the sun in its path across the sky, like the stars shifting slowly in the night. Every point scored, every fall, every rebound is more than movement. It is a mirror of eternity. The hero twins, in myth, eventually triumphed over the lords of Xibalba through the game and through cleverness. They allowed themselves to be defeated and killed, only to be reborn, transformed into beings of light. Their victory was not destruction of death, but transformation through it. The ball game in this way embodied the same lesson, that life continues, that rhythm returns, that death itself can be part of renewal. For the Maya, This story lived in every game played. Each time the ball struck the ground, it was as though the world reminded itself, the cycle continues. Nothing ends without beginning again. As centuries passed, the ball game spread across Mesoamerica, from the Olmecs before the Maya to the Aztecs after them. Yet among the Maya, it held a uniquely sacred role, tied directly to the afterlife. To step into the court was to step into myth, to step into the same cosmic struggle that defined their understanding of death and rebirth. And so, the ball game stands not as an echo of entertainment, but as a testament to the Maya way of seeing the world. A world in which the boundaries between sport, ritual, myth, and life itself dissolve. A world in which the ball's movement was as steady and eternal as the stars. Perhaps that is why the courts still endure, even in ruin. They are empty now, filled with silence, yet their outlines speak. They whisper of the contests once played, of the lives once risked, of the myths once made real with every bounce of the ball. To stand among them is to feel the weight of time, the sense that the game is still being played, somewhere beyond sight. For the Maya, it never truly ended. The hero twins still play, still descend, still rise. The ball still moves, endlessly, like the turning of the heavens. And in that rhythm, they found comfort, a reminder that even in struggle, even in death, the cycle carries forward, always beginning again. Chapter 6: The Hero Twins and Their Descent into Darkness. The story of the hero twins, Hunop and Xibalba, lies at the very heart of the Maya vision of life, death, and renewal. Preserved in the Porpo Va, their journey into Xibalba is not simply a tale of adventure. It is a myth that explains how death is faced, how it is endured, and how it is ultimately transcended. To follow their path is to step quietly into the Maya imagination, where the underworld is not a prison, but a stage upon which the soul is tested, stripped of illusions, and made new. The tale begins before the twins' birth, with their father Hunop and his brother Hunop. These two men were great ball players, whose loud games disturbed the lords of Xibalba. Offended, the lords summoned them into the underworld to compete. Yet the brothers were unprepared for the deceptions and traps that awaited them. They failed each test, and in the end, Hunop was killed. His head was hung in a calabash tree, where it seemed to transform into fruit. From this tree came a miraculous conception. A maiden named Zequik encountered the skull, and through a touch that mingled death and life, she conceived the hero twins. Already, the story reveals a theme. From death arises life, and even in darkness, renewal waits as children. Hunop and Xibalba grew strong and clever. They too became skilled ball players, echoing the legacy of their father. Their games, like those before them, caught the attention of the lords of Xibalba. Once more, an invitation was sent. Yet this time, it was not a call to punishment, but a challenge. The twins accepted, and so began their descent into the underworld. The path to Xibalba was itself a test. According to the Porpo Va, the road was filled with rivers of scorpions, rivers of blood, and rivers of pus. Each crossing demanded courage, patience, and endurance. At last, the twins came to a crossroads where trickery lay in wait. Wooden figures, carved to resemble lords, sat upon thrones. Believing them real, many souls bowed in error, offering respect where none was due. But the twins were wise. They greeted the wooden statues with humor, and in doing so revealed their falsehood. Already they had shown themselves more perceptive than their father. Upon entering the true court of Xibalba, the twins faced the first of many deceptions. The lords offered them seats, but the benches were not what they seemed. They were hot stones, meant to burn them. Yet Hunop and Xibalba anticipated the trick and did not sit. This moment set the tone for all that followed. The lords relied on illusion and intimidation, but the twins met them with calm and cunning. The trials of Xibalba were organized into houses, each a chamber of peril. The twins were sent into the house of darkness, where no light existed. Yet they carried fireflies and a torch treated with red feathers, making it appear to burn without being consumed. In the house of knives, they spoke gently to the blades, turning them into allies instead of enemies. In the house of jaguars, they fed the beast's bones, distracting them from attack. Each trial became not an end, but an opportunity to reveal cleverness. The underworld sought to break them, but the twins turned its traps back upon themselves. In one episode, Hunop's head was cut off by a bat god. Yet even this loss was not final. Xibalba shaped a substitute head from a squash, placing it upon his brother's body until the true head could be restored. Here, the story carries a lesson. Even in moments of loss, life finds ways to endure. Death can wound, but it cannot utterly erase what is destined to return. The greatest trial, however, was the ballgame itself. Just as their father had been summoned to play, so too were the twins challenged by the lords. The game was dangerous, for the ball was no ordinary object. It was filled with blades, designed to injure and kill. Yet the twins were cautious and refused to play recklessly. When the lords tried to trick them with deadly objects disguised as balls, the twins outwitted them, refusing to be deceived. Their patience, not their strength, kept them safe. Eventually, the lords captured the twins and cast them into an oven, burning their bodies to ash. For most, this would have been the end. Yet the hero twins were not ordinary souls. From the ashes, they transformed. Their remains were cast into the river, where they emerged as fish, and then as wandering magicians. Disguised, they returned to Xibalba, performing feats of resurrection and transformation. They killed themselves and brought themselves back to life. They killed others and revived them. The lords, fascinated and deceived by this power, asked the twins to perform the act upon them. But when the lords were slain, the twins did not bring them back. In this way, the hero twins conquered death itself, not by force, but through wisdom, patience, and transformation. The story concludes with the twins ascending into the heavens, becoming the sun and the moon. Their victory over Xibalba was not an erasure of death, but a balancing of it. Death remained, but it no longer held absolute power. The cycle was complete. Life leads to death, and death leads again to life. Just as day turns to night and night returns to day. For the Maya, this story was more than entertainment. It explained why the ballgame was sacred. It showed why death was not final. It revealed the importance of wit, humility, and resilience in the face of suffering. And it gave hope that just as the hero twins rose again, so too might every soul find renewal beyond the darkness. One can imagine the tale being told by firelight, with children listening, comforted by the idea that death was not the end. Or perhaps recited in ritual, where rulers and priests traced their lineage back to the hero twins, claiming their legacy. In every retelling, the message was clear. Death could not be avoided, but it could be faced, endured, and transformed into something new. And so, the descent of the hero twins into darkness remains one of the most profound myths of the Maya. It is a reminder that even when surrounded by shadow, wisdom can guide the way. That even when broken apart, life can return in new form. And that in the cycle of existence, nothing is ever truly lost. What does it mean that two brothers, armed not with weapons, but with cleverness and patience, could triumph over death itself? Perhaps the Maya were telling us something simple yet eternal, that the true victory is not to escape death, but to embrace it, to pass through it, and to find in it the seed of renewal. Chapter 7: Transformation into the Sun and Moon. When the hero twins completed their journey through Xibalba, they did not remain in the underworld. Their story did not end with victory over the lords of death. Instead, it continued upward, beyond the shadows, into the sky itself. From the ashes of trial and the silence of the grave, Hunop and Xebalunk rose, transformed into the most enduring lights of the heavens. One became the sun, radiant and steady, a source of warmth and growth. The other became the moon, gentle and reflective, a companion to the night. For the Maya, this was more than myth. It was a way of seeing the sky as a living memory of their ancestors' courage, a constant reminder that even death could blossom into light everlasting. The Popol Vuh tells us that the transformation of the hero twins was not sudden but earned. They had descended into the deepest trials of Xibalba. They had suffered, been broken, even reduced to ashes. Yet through wit and resilience, they had endured. To ascend as the sun and moon was not merely a reward, but a natural continuation of their journey. Death, in the Maya understanding, was not a wall but a passage. And the passage, if met with wisdom, could lead to something eternal, to the people who looked up at the sky. The daily and nightly cycle became a reflection of this myth. Each dawn was Hunop's victory, as the sun returned after the long hours of darkness. Each night, Xebolunk's moon traced a gentler rhythm, reminding those who watched that death was not to be feared but understood. In this way, the heavens were not distant or silent. They were alive with story, guiding human beings to see their own struggles as part of a cosmic pattern. It is striking how the Maya described the balance between the twins. Hunop, as the sun, carried the strength of fire, vitality, and growth. His light fed the maize, warmed the earth, and made life possible. Xibalunk, as the moon, offered a softer rhythm, one that marked the cycles of time, the flow of seasons, the mystery of tides, and the quiet comfort of night. Neither overpowered the other. Instead, they existed in harmony, sharing the sky, balancing light with shadow, heat with coolness, day with night. This harmony reflected a core truth of Maya cosmology. Existence was not about eliminating darkness, but about holding it in balance with light. Death and life, shadow and radiance, suffering and renewal, all were part of the same whole. The hero twins, by becoming celestial bodies, embodied that truth. Their story was a lesson in transformation, showing that struggle and suffering were not endpoints, but doorways to something greater for the Maya. These transformations also carried political and ritual significance. Rulers often connected themselves to the hero twins, seeing in their triumph a reflection of royal duty. Just as the twins rose to the sky to ensure balance, kings performed rituals to sustain cosmic order on Earth. The sun and the moon were not abstract symbols. They were reminders of responsibility, renewal, and the sacred rhythm that bound heaven, earth, and the underworld together. And yet, beyond politics, there is something deeply human in this myth. to look at the sun and moon and imagine that they are not distant, burning spheres, but living presences born from courage. This transforms the act of skygazing into something intimate and comforting. Every sunrise could remind a weary heart that renewal is always possible. Every moonrise could soothe a restless mind with the thought that gentleness has a place beside power. Archaeological evidence suggests that this story was not confined to words alone. Maya cities were often aligned with celestial cycles. Temples and pyramids cast shadows at solstices and equinoxes, tracking the sun's journey. Ceremonies were timed by the moon, guiding farmers, priests, and kings alike. In the rhythms of daily life, the hero twins' transformation into celestial lights was not a distant legend, but a living presence woven into time itself. And still, questions remain. Why did one twin become the sun and the other the moon? Some versions suggest Hunop took the brighter path, while Xibalba accepted the gentler role. Others see the balance as deliberate, the twins embodying not competition but complement. Their story resists a single explanation, as myths often do. Instead, it lingers in mystery, inviting reflection. Perhaps the Maya themselves found comfort in that uncertainty, in knowing that the heavens carried not final answers but eternal reminders. Imagine, for a moment, a Maya night. The jungle breathing in quiet rhythm, fires fading to embers, and the vast sky arching overhead. In that silence, the moon rises, casting silver across stone temples. To those watching, it was not just light. It was the presence of a brother who had conquered death, keeping watch through the night. And at dawn, when the first rays broke the horizon, it was not only sunlight that returned, but the living proof of resilience, the other brother rising again, ensuring warmth, growth, and the promise of another day. The hero twins did not end their journey in silence. They became part of the eternal rhythm of existence, forever visible, forever guiding. Their triumph was not about defeating death once and for all, but about showing how to pass through it with courage and emerge into something greater. To gaze upon the sun and the moon is to see not only celestial bodies, but the memory of two souls who entered darkness and returned transformed. Their story whispers to us still that even in moments of greatest trial, renewal is possible, that endings may carry the seeds of beginnings, and that, above us always, light and shadow keep their eternal balance, reminding us to rest gently in the rhythm of existence. Chapter 8. The Road of the Soul After Death in Maya Belief. Death was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a journey, a long and careful road the soul would travel after leaving the body. This journey was not taken in haste. It unfolded step by step, as if across an unseen landscape of rivers, forests, and thresholds. Every person, whether king or farmer, child or elder, was thought to walk this path. And just as travelers on earth prepared themselves for a long voyage, so too did the Maya prepare their loved ones for the passage beyond life. The Popol, Va, and other sacred traditions describe the afterlife not as a single place, but as a movement through spaces layered with challenge and meaning. Souls crossed rivers of blood and rivers of pus. They walked roads of stone and thorn, each demanding patience and endurance. The lords of Xibalba set trials, not out of cruelty alone, but because death was seen as a process of cleansing, of transformation. To reach peace, the soul first had to release fear, pride, and attachment. Rituals played an essential role in easing this passage. When someone died, ceremonies were performed to guide their spirit toward the underworld. Offerings of food, drink, and personal belongings were placed with the body, so the traveler would not go empty-handed. In some burials, jade beads were set in the mouth of the deceased, symbols of breath, life, and renewal, as if to give the soul strength for the journey ahead. The living did not imagine their care as wasted. They believed each gesture reached across the threshold, helping their loved ones step more gently into the unseen world. The road of the soul was also marked by direction. To the Maya, the cosmos was ordered along the 4 cardinal points, each tied to colors, deities, and elements. East was red, the place of sunrise and renewal. West was black, the realm of endings and the descent into Xibalba. North was white, connected to ancestors and wisdom. South was yellow, the path of growth and fertility. In this sacred geography, the soul's movement was not random. It was a journey through the very fabric of cosmic order, guided by forces larger than itself. Yet the path was not walked alone. Ancestors were believed to wait, to receive and accompany the newly departed. Death was not isolation, but reunion. Families kept altars and performed rituals not only to honor their dead, but to maintain a connection. The soul's road was therefore lined with memory and presence, softened by the knowledge that others had gone before. Still, the trials of the road were real. The Maya described houses of fire, of cold, of blades and fear. These were not imagined as eternal punishments, but as places of testing. Each stage of the journey stripped away illusion and weakness, leaving the soul prepared for renewal. It is here that the story of the hero twins echoed most strongly, for their descent into Xibalba served as a model for every human soul. If they could endure, so too could others. One may wonder how people felt, knowing such a journey awaited them. Was it fear? Or was it comfort, knowing the path was ancient and familiar? For the Maya, the answer may have been both. Death was daunting, yet it was also part of the eternal cycle. Just as maize is planted, buried in the earth, and then rises again as food, so too did the soul descend and return in new form. The road was hard, but it led somewhere meaningful. Archaeology provides glimpses of how these beliefs shaped daily life. In caves, which the Maya saw as entrances to Xibalba, offerings were left, pottery, blood, and incense, given to ease the journey of souls and to maintain harmony with the underworld. These sacred places were both earthly and otherworldly, thresholds between realms. To stand at the mouth of a cave was to stand at the edge of the soul's path, gazing into mystery. In quieter ways, too, the road of the soul-shaped life. The timing of funerals followed celestial patterns, aligning the fate of the departed with the cycles of the sun and moon. Priests recited words to guide the spirit. Families kept watch with offerings of copal incense, believing the rising smoke formed a bridge between worlds. These rituals were not mere gestures. They were maps, prayers, and provisions for a road that all would one day travel. To imagine this journey is to feel a slow, steady rhythm, the sound of water as rivers are crossed, the silence of forests where spirits linger, the weight of darkness softened by the presence of guiding ancestors. For the Maya, this was the soul's reality, not seen with the eyes, but known through the stories and rituals that gave shape to the unseen. And so the question lingers. When a soul sets out on its journey, does it walk with fear or with peace? Perhaps both, for the Maya did not deny the hardship of the road, but they also believed in its purpose. To travel was to be transformed. To endure was to come closer to renewal. The road of the soul after death was not an ending but a threshold, where each step carried the promise of return. Even now, to think of that road is to feel its quiet weight. A reminder that death is not a void but a path, walked slowly, patiently, with the guidance of those who came before. And perhaps, just perhaps, to reflect on that journey is to find comfort in the thought that what waits beyond is not silence, but passage. Chapter 9. Rituals of Farewell and Sacred Offerings. When a Maya life came to its close, the moment was not marked by silence alone. It was filled with ritual, song, and the gentle weight of offerings. Death was not seen as a disappearance, but as a departure, a crossing of thresholds. And like any traveler preparing for a long journey, the soul required provisions. These offerings were more than tokens of affection. They were bridges stretched between the living and the unseen world. Gestures of farewell whispered into eternity. Among the most sacred gifts was jade. The Maya regarded this stone not simply as precious, but as alive with meaning. Its cool green shimmer was linked to breath, water, and the essence of life itself. Small jade beads were sometimes placed in the mouths of the departed, a symbol that the soul carried with it the seed of renewal. To offer jade was to affirm that life continued, that death was not absence but transformation. Maize, too, held profound power. To the Maya, maize was not only food, it was creation itself. Their myths told of humanity's origin, shaped from maize dough by the gods. At burials, kernels of maize were offered so the soul would carry sustenance, but also so it would remain connected to its origin story. Each grain was a reminder. Just as maize is planted in the earth to rise again, so too does the human soul descend and return. To place maize at a gravesite was to plant hope for rebirth. Sacred water was poured as libation, a ritual act of blessing. In Maya thought, water was both origin and passage. It linked rivers on earth to the streams of the underworld, where souls would need to cross. By pouring water beside the dead, families symbolically eased the way, offering refreshment for the difficult journey. The act itself was quiet, but it carried a depth of reassurance. Funerary rites often involved incense as well. Copal resin burned slowly, released fragrant smoke rising into the air. To the Maya, the smoke was a bridge, a visible current between earth and sky, between human prayer and divine ear. As families gathered, they did not speak only to each other. They spoke through the smoke, sending their words upward, carried on the drifting stream. In this way, offerings were not silent. They became dialogue between the living and their ancestors, between earth and the unseen. Archaeology reveals how deeply these beliefs shaped practice. Tombs of nobles have been discovered filled with jade ornaments, painted ceramics, shells, and even cacao. Commoners too, though with simpler means, left offerings of maize, water, and clay vessels. The difference was not in meaning, but in scale. Every person, regardless of status, deserved farewell. Every soul was equipped with what was needed to cross the boundary between worlds. The rites themselves unfolded slowly. A body might be wrapped in cloth, painted with symbols of rebirth, or adorned with feathers and shells. Priests or family members whispered words of guidance, calling upon gods and ancestors to receive the spirit. Each object placed near the deceased carried symbolic weight, not random, not decorative, but chosen for its resonance in the journey to come, and always. The ceremonies were performed not only for the departed, but for those who remained. By placing jade, maize, and water, the living reaffirmed their own place within the eternal cycle. Farewell was not only sorrow, but participation. The act of giving became a way of aligning the living with the truth, that death was a passage all must one day take. One can imagine the stillness of such a scene. A dim chamber lit by flickering flame, the scent of copal heavy in the air, family members kneeling, placing small offerings with careful hands, a priest speaking words that blended myth and prayer. In this moment, grief softened into ritual, sorrow folded into the larger rhythm of the cosmos. What is striking is how these offerings held layers of meaning. Jade gave breath, maize gave renewal, water gave passage. Together, they formed a trinity of care, surrounding the soul with continuity, nourishment, and safe crossing. The Maya did not abandon their dead to uncertainty. They equipped them with tokens that carried both physical and spiritual significance. The offerings also reveal how the Maya viewed the bond between worlds. Death was not a wall, but a threshold. To give jade, maize, or water was to send something tangible across that threshold, a gesture that connected realms. And in turn, the act reminded the living of their ongoing relationship with those who had departed. Farewell was not a severing. It was a transformation of presence, from the visible to the invisible. As centuries passed, these traditions remained embedded in Maya culture. Even today, echoes can be found in modern practices: candles lit on altars, food placed for ancestors, prayers rising with smoke. The form may shift, but the essence endures. The act of offering is the act of remembering, and remembering is a way of keeping souls close. To reflect on these rituals is to feel their quiet wisdom. The Maya knew that grief is heavy, but they also knew that ritual gives it shape. By placing gifts with the dead, they transformed sorrow into action, and action into peace. Their offerings were not meant to stop death, but to make its passage gentle, its road less lonely. And so, to leave behind a jade bead, a kernel of maize, a vessel of water, was to send a prayer into eternity. A prayer that whispered, "You are not forgotten. You do not walk alone. Your journey is ours as well, for we are bound together in life and beyond." Chapter 10: The ceiba tree and the cosmic axis. In Maya belief, the world was not a flat and ordinary place. It was layered, ordered, and alive with connection. At the very center of this cosmic order stood the ceiba tree, with roots burrowing deep into the unseen earth and branches stretching high into the heavens. The ceiba was more than a plant. It was a symbol of the universe itself, a living axis binding realms together. The Maya imagined the cosmos as three great layers. Below lay Xibalba, the underworld, mysterious and shadowed. Above spread the celestial realms, filled with stars, planets, and divine beings. Between them lay the earthly plane, where human life unfolded. The ceiba tree connected these realms, making passage possible. Its roots pierced the watery caves and rivers of the underworld. Its trunk stood firm upon the earth, the realm of maize and humanity, and its branches reached skyward, touching the path of the sun and stars. The ceiba was not chosen at random. Its physical presence matched the role it was given in myth. Tall, straight, and crowned with a wide canopy, the tree seemed to touch both horizon and sky. Its roots, vast and spreading, mirrored the unseen depths beneath. To stand before it was to stand at a crossroads of worlds, a reminder that existence stretched far beyond what eyes could see. In Maya art and inscriptions, the ceiba often appears as the world tree, its branches hosting birds of celestial power, its trunk adorned with symbols of life, and its roots entwined with creatures of Xibalba. This imagery reminded people that their lives unfolded within a larger order. The tree was not just a sacred plant, but a map of the soul's journey from birth to death. From descent into trial to ascent into renewal, the ceiba also carried direction. The Maya imagined for ceiba trees planted at the corners of the earth, each tied to a cardinal point and a color: red for the east, white for the north, black for the west, and yellow for the south. At the very center stood the fifth ceiba, often depicted in green, the color of life and balance. Together, these trees anchored the cosmos, giving shape to the invisible structure of the world. To live within this order was to live within harmony. Ceremonies often reflected this cosmic tree. Maya priests conducted rituals oriented to the four directions, offering food, incense, and blood to maintain balance. The ceiba served as both symbol and stage. It was planted in villages, its shade a gathering place for councils, markets, and sacred events. Beneath its branches, the community found alignment with the universe itself. Yet the ceiba was not only about structure. It carried meaning for the soul's passage after death. Just as its roots reached into Xibalba and its branches into the heavens, so too did the soul move along its axis. At death, one's essence descended into the underworld, facing trials of shadow. But in time, with endurance and transformation, the soul could ascend again, rising as surely as the ceiba's branches reach into light. In this way, the tree embodied both descent and ascent, loss and renewal. Archaeological evidence supports the ceiba's sacred role. In murals and carvings, ceiba imagery appears alongside depictions of gods, ancestors, and cosmic journeys. In some stele, kings were portrayed as standing beside the ceiba, or even becoming its trunk, embodying the bridge between human and divine. This was not symbolic only. It was a declaration of responsibility. Rulers were tasked with holding balance, just as the ceiba held the world. For common people, too, the ceiba's presence shaped daily spirituality. Its shade offered coolness in hot landscapes, its towering height a landmark visible for miles. Stories passed down through generations wove the tree into myth and memory. Children grew up hearing that its roots touched the underworld and its branches brushed the stars. To climb, it was to risk touching the sacred. To stand near it was to stand where earth and sky met in silence. One can imagine how its presence must have felt. In a clearing, the ceiba rising higher than all else, its trunk broad, its branches spread wide like protective arms. Villagers gathering beneath it, speaking softly, performing rites, leaving offerings. Above, the sun moved through its branches, and at night, stars shimmered as if resting upon its crown. For the Maya, this was not imagination, it was reality. Embodied in the ceiba's form, reflecting on the ceiba draws one into questions the Maya themselves must have pondered. If life is rooted in shadow but stretches toward light, does not every person embody a ceiba within? Roots tied to ancestry, earth, and mortality. A trunk that endures the winds of daily life. Branches reaching beyond, toward the mystery of stars and divine presence. The ceiba was not just a tree, but a mirror, reflecting back the layered truth of human existence. The ceiba reminds us that to live is to dwell between worlds, to walk the earth, yet be touched by what lies above and below. Its presence assured the Maya that their world was ordered, their connections held firm even in times of uncertainty. And at the heart of this assurance lay a gentle promise. Just as the ceiba stands firm across generations, so too does the soul remain part of the eternal axis, moving but never lost. And so, to rest beneath its shade is to feel what the Maya must have felt. A stillness where earth and sky meet. A quiet reassurance that life is bound to greater realms, that the journey of the soul is never solitary. For in the roots and branches of the ceiba lies the path of existence itself, eternal, unbroken, reaching endlessly in both directions. Chapter 11. The 13 Heavens of the Maya. For the ancient Maya, the universe was not a single, undivided expanse. It was ordered, structured, and layered with meaning. Beneath the earth stretched the underworld, a place of rivers, trials, and tests of spirit. But above the earth, rising into the sky, extended 13 heavens, each one resting upon the other like steps toward light. These heavens formed the highest reaches of the cosmos, a realm of divine beings and luminous order. The number 13 itself carried deep significance. It was sacred in the Maya calendar, tied to cycles of time and ritual. 13 days marked the trezena, the sacred count of their divinatory calendar. 13 heavens reflected this same rhythm in the structure of the universe. Time and space were woven together, so that to understand the heavens was also to understand the pulse of the days. Each of these heavens was ruled by divine beings, known in some accounts as the Oxlahuntikyu, or 13 gods. They were not merely rulers but keepers of order, presiding over creation, fertility, rain, and destiny. In the Maya world, divinity was not distant or abstract. It was intimate, woven into maize, water, sky, and stone. The heavens were imagined as living thresholds, places through which the soul might journey, each layer carrying its own resonance and purpose. Archaeological and ethno-historical sources describe the heavens in symbolic terms. Some layers were linked to celestial bodies, the movement of the sun, the glow of Venus, the constellations that patterned the night. Others reflected forces of life, fertility, growth, and renewal. The heavens were stacked, not as empty spaces, but as realms of influence. They guided both the physical world and the spiritual passage of the soul. In the Maya imagination, the heavens were luminous and expansive. They were not harshly divided from human life, but touched the world daily through cycles of rain, sunlight, and starlight. Priests and astronomers observed the skies carefully, mapping the movements of stars and planets as reflections of these heavenly layers. In their calendars and rituals, they mirrored the structure above, ensuring that human action remained in harmony with divine order. The 13 heavens also held a place in ritual architecture. Temples and pyramids rose toward the sky in step-like forms, echoing the layers above. To climb a pyramid was not just to ascend stone steps, but to symbolically move closer to the heavens. The highest platforms, where rituals and offerings were performed, stood as bridges to the divine. In this way, architecture itself became a reflection of cosmology. The stones of earth pointed upward, reminding all who saw them of the unseen heights beyond. For the soul, the 13 heavens represented more than a structure. They were a path of ascension. At death, the journey did not end in darkness. After trials in the underworld, after descent into Xibalba, the soul could rise again. Slowly, softly, it could be lifted through the heavens, one layer at a time. Each ascent brought it closer to light, to harmony, to the radiant order of creation. The Maya envisioned this upward journey as gentle rather than abrupt. The heavens were not gates of judgment, but thresholds of transformation. To rise was to pass into greater refinement, to shed heaviness and enter clarity. In this way, the heavens reflected a hope that beyond death lay not only trial, but also renewal and peace. There is a quiet symmetry in this cosmology. Below the earth stretched 9 layers of the underworld, places of challenge and endurance. Above the earth rose 13 heavens, luminous and serene. Together, they balanced the cosmos. Between them lay the middle world, where human beings lived their lives. The ceiba tree, with its roots in shadow and its branches in light, embodied this balance. Life was not fixed in one place, but stretched between descent and ascent, trial and release. Maya mythology often tied the heavens to creation itself. In some accounts, the gods descended from the highest layers to shape the earth, the maze, and humanity. The heavens were a source, a place of origin. They held the divine essence from which life was formed and to which life could eventually return. When one gazes at the night sky, filled with countless stars, it is easy to see how the Maya might have envisioned each point of light as a reflection of the layers above. But the heavens were not just about what lay beyond. They guided daily life. Priests, through ritual and observation, interpreted the will of the heavens in matters of planting, harvest, and destiny. The 13 heavens were not remote abstractions. They shaped when to sow maize, when to call upon rain, when to seek guidance for journeys or wars. The divine order was woven into the soil itself, so that to live well on earth meant to remain aligned with the luminous order above. 1 can imagine standing on a clear night in the Maya lowlands. The jungle air still, the stars stretched endlessly overhead. Above that darkness, the Maya would have envisioned 13 luminous layers, each gentler, each brighter than the last. To them, the sky was not empty. It was alive, filled with divine presence. It was a ladder for the soul, a reminder that existence reached far beyond what the eye could see. And here, reflection arises. What does it mean to believe that life continues upward? That after the trials of shadow, there is a lifting, a return to light? The Maya vision of 13 heavens suggests a universe where nothing is final, where every descent holds the possibility of renewal. It is a reminder that existence itself is layered, that peace lies not only in endings, but in ascension. The 13 heavens remain a quiet echo of how the Maya understood their place in the cosmos. They are not merely myth, but a way of seeing the world, luminous, layered, alive with connection. To walk upon the earth was to stand between shadow and light, between the depths below and the heavens above. And for the Maya, that balance was not a burden, but a promise. Perhaps this is the gentlest lesson of their vision, that even in a universe filled with trials and shadows, the path of the soul does not end in darkness. Slowly, softly, it rises, one threshold after another, 13 heavens above, each more radiant than the last. A promise written in the sky that life, like the stars, ascends toward eternal light. Chapter 12. The gods of renewal and light among the pantheon of Mayan deities. There were gods who represented challenge, shadow, and trial. Yet alongside them stood beings of gentleness, healing, and renewal. These were the gods of light, deities who reminded the Maya that life is not only struggle, but also restoration. In their myths, they carried the promise that after each ending, something new begins. Foremost among them was its often regarded as one of the most important creator gods of the Maya. His name was spoken with reverence, for he was associated with wisdom, writing, medicine, and the very order of creation itself. In some traditions, Itzamna was described as the son of the original dual creator gods, embodying their sacred balance. He was imagined as an aged deity, wise and patient, a reminder that creation is not only an act of power, but also one of enduring care. Itzamna was linked to the sky and the sun, embodying the energy of life and the rhythms of time. Through him, the cycles of day and night found their balance, and the patterns of seasons were preserved. He was credited with introducing writing and knowledge to humanity, a gift that allowed memory and history to endure. In this sense, he was not only a creator of the cosmos, but also a keeper of human continuity. His role bridged the divine and the mortal, weaving together existence with meaning. Yet Itzamna was not alone. Beside him stood Ixchel, the great goddess of the moon, weaving, childbirth, and medicine. Her name carried multiple layers of meaning, often translated as Lady Rainbow or She of the Pale Face. She embodied both the gentle light of the moon and the transformative cycles of life. As goddess of midwives and healers, she was honored for her care over birth, growth, and renewal. She reminded the Maya that every life enters the world through passage and pain, but also through sacred blessing. Ixchel was also tied to water, rivers, rains, and the fertility of the earth. She was often portrayed with a vessel from which streams of water poured, nourishing crops and renewing the soil. Through her, the Maya recognized the intimate connection between celestial rhythms and earthly abundance. She was a goddess who touched both sky and ground, embodying renewal in every form. The partnership of Itzamna and Ix Chel revealed the balance the Maya sought in their worldview. He embodied the sky, wisdom, and structure. She embodied the moon, fertility, and flowing renewal. Together, they reflected the harmony of creation and the promise of continuation. Their myths did not erase the reality of suffering or trial, but they placed these struggles within a larger rhythm, where renewal always followed loss. Archaeological evidence shows how deeply these deities were honored. At the island of Cozumel, Ixchel was worshipped as a principal goddess, with pilgrims traveling long distances to offer devotion. Women especially sought her blessings for fertility and safe childbirth. The journey itself became a ritual of renewal, a reminder that divine presence was not confined to the heavens but could be found in sacred landscapes upon the earth itself. Too appeared in codices and inscriptions as a figure of wisdom and divine order. In some depictions, he takes the form of a celestial bird, watching over creation. In others, he appears as an aged priest, a symbol of knowledge and continuity. Through such imagery, the Maya preserved his role as both a cosmic force and a guiding presence within their communities. Reflection arises. Here, what does it mean to honor gods who embody renewal? Perhaps it is to affirm that life is always more than endings, that beneath the surface of loss, something prepares to rise again. The Maya saw this in the sprouting of maize, in the waxing of the moon, in the return of rains after dry seasons. Their deities were not distant abstractions, but mirrors of these rhythms. To honor them was to remain attentive to the cycles of nature, and to trust that renewal would come. Other deities, too, carried the essence of light and regeneration. Kanichajor, the sun god, embodied warmth, vitality, and the energy of life. His presence was feared at times, for the sun's heat could scorch as well as nourish. Yet his rising each day was a reassurance that light always returns. Even after the longest night, his face would appear again at dawn in some accounts. Kainich Ajar was also connected to rebirth after death. His journey across the sky mirrored the path of the soul, reminding all that descent into shadow is always followed by ascent into light. In this way, his presence echoed the broader Maya vision, that existence is never static, but always moving in cycles of loss and renewal. Together, these deities created a network of reassurance. They reminded the Maya that just as the maize stalk must be cut before new seeds are sown, endings are not failures, but thresholds. They invited reflection upon the delicate balance of creation, where pain and healing, death and renewal exist side by side. The myths of Itzamna and Ixchel, of the sun and the moon, carried this truth gently. They did not erase human suffering, but placed it within a wider horizon, where renewal is always possible. In honoring these gods, the Maya honored the cycles of life itself, the rain returning to dry fields, the moon filling after darkness, the seed sprouting from the soil. Perhaps this is why their stories continue to speak softly across centuries. They remind us that beneath every ending lies the shape of a beginning not yet seen. That creation is not a single act, but a rhythm, repeated again and again. That light, whether from sun or moon, whether from wisdom or healing, continues to rise, and so the gods of renewal and light remain. In their myths, in the soil, in the rhythms of day and night, they still whisper the same assurance, that the journey of existence is never closed, that every descent carries the promise of ascent, that beyond each silence, a new voice begins. Chapter 13. The Duality of Light and Shadow. The Maya believed that life was never singular. Every joy was tempered by sorrow. Every darkness contained within it the seed of light. In their worldview, duality was not a contradiction, but the natural order of existence. The cosmos itself was built upon this rhythm, a weaving together of opposing yet complementary forces. This sense of balance appeared in nearly every layer of their beliefs. In the movement of the sun, which vanished into darkness each night only to rise again with the dawn. In the cycles of maize, which died with the harvest but returned each season to feed the people once more. In the human heart, where courage and fear lived side by side, inseparable yet necessary, the Maya saw the afterlife in the same way. It was not a place of endless torment, nor an eternal paradise. Instead, it reflected the dual truth of existence. Life after death carried both challenge and rest, shadow and light. It was a continuation of the cosmic balance rather than a final judgment. To enter this realm was to step into a rhythm already familiar, the same rhythm that guided the living. Their myths of creation spoke often of this interplay. The Popol Vuh, the sacred text of the Kej Maya, tells how the hero twins descended into Xibalba, the underworld, where lords of death tested and tricked them with games of suffering. The twins faced darkness, humiliation, and even death itself. Yet out of these trials came victory and renewal. They transformed into the sun and the moon, restoring balance to the world. Their journey revealed the heart of Maya belief, that shadow is never the end, but the necessary companion of light. Xibalba itself embodied this duality. It was a realm of trial, filled with rivers of blood, houses of knives, and chambers of eternal darkness. Yet it was also the womb of transformation. To pass through its ordeals was not simply to be punished, but to be remade. Even in the heart of shadow, the potential for renewal remained. The afterlife, therefore, was not solely a place to fear. It was a mirror of existence, both perilous and promising. Archaeological evidence echoes this view. Murals, carvings, and codices often depicted gods of death alongside gods of fertility and life. The two stood not as enemies, but as counterparts. The skeletal deity of decay was frequently shown beside images of maize sprouting anew. Life and death intermingled in sacred art, reinforcing that one could not exist without the other. This vision extended into ritual practice. In funerary offerings, jade was placed upon the body, a symbol of life, breath, and renewal. Yet alongside it might be obsidian, stone born of fire, sharp and dark. Together, these objects spoke to the dual journey of the soul, toward shadow and toward light. Neither was denied. Both were embraced. To reflect on this duality is to ask, what does it mean to live with the knowledge that every joy carries sorrow and every sorrow carries light? For the Maya, this was not a burden but a comfort. It freed them from extremes of hope or fear. Existence was not judged in absolutes, but carried gently in balance. Even the gods themselves embodied this truth, with deities who ruled both creation and destruction. Healing and harm, its Samna, the wise sky god, brought knowledge and order, but he was also linked to the burning heat of the sun, which could scorch fields and bring drought. Ixchel, goddess of childbirth and fertility, was also a goddess of floods and storms, whose waters could destroy as well as nourish. The gods themselves were never one-sided, and through them the Maya learned to accept the layered nature of reality in daily life. This philosophy shaped how communities approached fate and fortune. Illness was not simply punishment, but part of a larger balance in which healing could also emerge. Harvests were not merely abundance or scarcity, but cycles in which loss today would lead to renewal tomorrow. The duality of light and shadow was lived not only in myth, but in every household, every field, every prayer. The afterlife mirrored this calm acceptance. Souls did not simply rise to a blissful paradise or descend to endless suffering. Instead, they moved through layers of challenge, guided by offerings, rituals, and divine presence. For some, the journey was smoother. Warriors who died in battle, or women who died in childbirth, were believed to be carried into the heavens more swiftly. But for most, the afterlife was a balance, echoing the life they had known: struggle and relief, fear and comfort, shadow and light. It is easy, in modern thought, to imagine opposites in conflict, to see darkness as the enemy of light. But for the Maya, these forces were partners, inseparable and necessary. Just as night prepares the dawn, just as seeds must be buried in earth before they grow, so too does shadow carry within it the promise of renewal. Perhaps this is why their myths remain so deeply moving. They speak not of eternal divisions, but of eternal balance. They remind us that no light shines without shadow, and no shadow falls without the presence of light nearby. Even in death, the Maya found not a final silence, but a continuation of this rhythm. To drift in their vision of the afterlife was not to be lost in despair, nor to rest in unbroken bliss. It was to enter the calm truth of balance everlasting, where every descent into shadow carried the possibility of rising into light, where endings and beginnings folded into one another without end. And so, the Maya lived and died within this eternal dance of opposites. A dance that continues still, in the rising of the sun, in the waxing of the moon, in the cycles of earth and heart. A reminder, gentle and enduring, that all things are twofold, and that balance is the deepest gift of existence. Chapter 14. Ancestors and the living connection. For the Maya, death was never an absolute departure. Those who passed on did not vanish into silence. They remained close, watching, guiding, and present within the daily rhythms of the living. Ancestors were part of the family, part of the household, part of the very fabric of life. Their presence was not imagined as distant or unreachable. Instead, it was near, felt in prayer, honored in ritual, and remembered in every cycle of offering. This conviction shaped how the Maya understood the bond between the living and the dead. To them, the veil separating the worlds was thin, more like a curtain than a wall. The souls of ancestors could listen, could respond, could intercede. They were both protectors and witnesses, ensuring that the balance of the community endured. In this sense, death was not an ending, but a shift in presence, a turning from physical life toward spiritual guardianship. Archaeological traces give us glimpses into this belief. Excavations of Maya homes reveal burials beneath floors, in courtyards, and at the thresholds of houses. These were not hidden away in distant cemeteries, but kept within the living space. The message was clear: the dead remained in the heart of the home. Each time a family member crossed the doorway or placed their feet upon the floor, they walked with their ancestors. Life and death interwove within the same walls, inseparable. Ceremonial offerings reinforced this closeness. Families placed food, drink, and treasured objects for the departed, gestures that carried both memory and nourishment. Maize, the lifeblood of Maya culture, was offered frequently, symbolizing continuity. The act was not merely symbolic, but relational. Just as one shared a meal with the living, one also shared with those who had passed on. The household became a sacred space, bridging the two realms through simple, repeated acts of care. The role of ancestors extended beyond private devotion. In broader society, lineage was the foundation of political and religious life. Maya kings often traced their authority to divine or semi-divine ancestors, legitimizing their rule as an extension of sacred inheritance. Monumental inscriptions recorded family trees, not only to remember the past, but to demonstrate that power and responsibility flowed through bloodlines, sanctified by the presence of those who had come before. To lead was not simply an individual achievement. It was the continuation of ancestral will. This reverence also shaped community rituals. Major festivals included acts of remembrance, when families gathered to honor the departed and reaffirm bonds across generations. The sacred calendar provided moments for these acts of connection. Certain days were set aside for speaking the names of ancestors, lighting fires in their memory, or seeking guidance for challenges yet to come. In these moments, time itself felt less linear. The past was not lost behind, but living alongside the present. The Maya understanding of ancestors carried with it a deep sense of continuity. To live well was to honor those who came before, and to prepare for one's own eventual role as an ancestor. Each generation stood as both recipient and giver, bound in a cycle of remembrance. Life became more than a solitary journey. It was part of a woven lineage, stretching backward into forgotten times and forward into futures yet unseen. Anthropologists often note how this perspective softened the fear of death. To know that one's presence would endure, still part of the family's daily life, offered reassurance. Death was not exile. It was not abandonment. It was another form of belonging, one that continued to nurture and be nurtured. For the Maya, this bond was not metaphorical, it was a lived reality, practiced in ritual and inscribed in stone. Even today, echoes of this worldview remain in Maya-descended communities. The Day of the Dead celebrations across Mesoamerica, though shaped by later traditions, still carry the same essence. Food for the departed, candles lit in memory, families gathering by graves or within homes to share presence across the veil. These living practices remind us that for many, ancestors are not gone. They are companions in silence, partners in continuity, and perhaps here lies a gentle lesson for the present. In a world that often treats death as final, distant, or unspeakable, the Maya invite us to imagine differently. What if those who came before us are not absent but near? What if the quiet moments we experience, a sudden memory, a sense of guidance, a warmth in stillness, are subtle reminders of this ongoing connection? The Maya lived their lives in constant awareness of this truth. Every stone set, every prayer whispered, every meal shared could carry with it an act of remembrance. The ancestors were not relics of the past, but active participants in the present. To sit in this understanding is to feel less alone, to know that even in silence, presence remains, that life continues not only forward, but also around us, held by the bonds of lineage and care. And so, in Maya thought, to live was to walk with ancestors. To die was to join them. And to remember was to ensure that neither light nor memory ever faded. In your own listening, you too may feel the quiet presence of those who came before. Not gone, only shifted. Still here, still near, in the unseen threads that bind past and present together. Chapter 15. Sacred Caves, Portals to the Afterlife. To the Maya, the earth was alive with thresholds. Mountains, rivers, and trees carried sacred meaning, but among them, caves stood apart as the deepest and most powerful of entrances. These dark chambers beneath the earth were not seen as empty spaces carved by stone and water. They were regarded as portals, openings into Xibalba, the underworld, where gods, spirits, and ancestors dwelled. The symbolism was clear. When the ground opened and descended into shadow, it echoed the journey of the soul after death, downward, inward, into mystery. To step into a cave was not simply to move into a hollow of rock, but to enter a place where the veil thinned, where the boundaries between the mortal world and the divine dissolved. Archaeological discoveries have shown how deeply this belief shaped ritual practice. Across the Maya world, from the limestone caves of the Yucatan to the dark caverns of Belize and Guatemala, sacred offerings have been found, vessels, jade, obsidian blades, and even the remains of human sacrifices. These offerings were not discarded objects. They were placed with reverence, left behind as gifts for gods of rain, fertility, and the underworld. Every shard and fragment carries the imprint of devotion, a dialogue between the living above and the unseen powers below. Some caves were especially revered. Acton Tenichel McNell in Belize, for example, holds the crystallized skeletons of individuals sacrificed centuries ago. Among them lies the figure known as the Crystal Maiden, whose bones, coated in calcite, shimmer softly in the torchlight. To walk through this cave is to move within a sacred archive, where stone, water, and human offering combine into one enduring record of devotion and passage. The Maya did not treat such places as ruins, but as living sanctuaries, sites where the balance between earth and spirit was continuously renewed. In the Maya worldview, caves also held a vital role in cosmology. They were often imagined as the womb of the earth, places of both birth and descent. Myths tell of humanity's origin in the darkness of caves, where ancestors first emerged into the light of the world. At the same time, caves were the roots by which souls returned to the underworld. This duality of birth and death, emergence and descent, reveals the way the Maya saw the universe as cyclical, with beginnings and endings flowing together in the same sacred spaces. Rituals inside caves mirrored this understanding. Priests and shamans entered with torches, their flames flickering against stone walls that echoed with sound. Smoke from burning copal resin rose upward, blurring the air, making the cave itself feel alive and breathing. Water dripping from stalactites was gathered as sacred thought to carry the essence of fertility and renewal. To pray here was to speak directly into the bones of the earth, where words carried deeper resonance. The acoustics of caves also shaped their meaning. Sound amplified, multiplied, and returned in ways that felt otherworldly. A single chant could ripple into the darkness, answered by echoes like unseen voices. For the Maya, this was not mere physics. It was presence, the acknowledgement that the spirits of Xibalba heard and responded. Silence, too, was powerful, a silence so complete that it mirrored the stillness of death, a reminder of the mystery each soul would one day face. Caves were not isolated from the larger structure of Maya cities and landscapes. Many temples and pyramids were deliberately built in alignment with nearby caves, linking the sacred architecture above ground with the sacred spaces below. In this way, the world of stone monuments and the hidden world beneath the earth formed one continuum of devotion. The temple rose toward the heavens. The caves sank toward the underworld. Together, they mirrored the ceiba tree roots below, branches above, trunk in the middle, the axis of the universe expressed in stone and shadow, human sacrifice within caves. Though sobering, carried meaning tied to these beliefs. Those who were offered were not erased but transformed, becoming messengers or companions for the gods below. Their presence sanctified the space, turning it into a permanent bridge between realms. While modern eyes may see only tragedy within the Maya framework, such acts were expressions of devotion and renewal, anchoring the belief that life and death were endlessly intertwined. But beyond rituals and offerings, caves carried a quieter, more personal meaning. Families and communities would sometimes enter these spaces for rain ceremonies, seeking the favor of Chok, the rain god, especially during times of drought. Water was life, and the gods of the underworld were thought to hold its release. To pray in the cave was to plead for survival, to remind the divine that human lives depended upon the gifts of the unseen world. And perhaps this is where the enduring power of caves rests, in their ability to remind humans of humility. To step into a cave is to be surrounded by stone older than memory, to hear drops of water that fall in rhythms older than language. The Maya felt this deeply. They entered not as masters of the earth, but as guests, as children returning to the womb of creation, asking for life, guidance, and blessing. Even today, caves remain sacred for Maya descendants. Rituals of prayer, offering, and reflection continue within them. They are not abandoned relics, but living spaces of devotion, carrying forward the same sense of nearness between the worlds. To light a candle in the depths of a cave is to continue a tradition that has lasted for centuries. A quiet dialogue across time, and when one imagines entering such a place, the cool air, the weight of silence, the flicker of flame against stone, it becomes easier to understand why caves were seen as portals. They do not simply hold emptiness, they hold presence. They hold the sense that the boundary between earth and spirit is thinner than we usually believe. In the end, the Maya vision of caves offers a reminder that beneath the surface of the everyday world lies another reality, vast, quiet, and enduring. A reality where souls pass, where gods dwell, where ancestors listen. To rest in the stillness of stone and shadow is to share, even briefly, in that ancient truth, that the earth is not silent, it is waiting, it is listening, and perhaps, if one listens closely enough, the earth answers back. Chapter 16. The flow of water and rivers of transition for the Maya. Water was never just a resource to be used or controlled. It was a sacred presence, a force that shaped both the physical world and the unseen realms beyond. Rivers, lakes, and underground streams were not only sources of life, but also thresholds, places where the soul might move between this world and the next. To follow the flow of water was to trace the path of existence itself, rising, moving, and eventually returning to the depths from which it came. In the mythology of the Popo Va, rivers appear again and again as barriers, tests, and crossings. When the hero twins descended into Xibalba, they encountered rivers of scorpions, of blood, and of pus, each one symbolic of the trials that the soul must endure before transformation. These were not literal streams, but visions of the challenges that death placed before every being. To cross such waters was to prove one's readiness for renewal. At the same time, not all rivers were hostile or threatening. Many were imagined as gentle guides, carrying the spirit toward its destination. Flowing water became a metaphor for continuity, for the unbroken passage of life into death, and death into something more. In this way, rivers symbolize transition without finality. Just as a river never truly ends but merges into greater bodies of water, so too the soul was believed to merge with wider realms of spirit. Archaeological findings confirmed that water played a central role in Maya funerary practice. Ceramic vessels filled with liquid offerings have been uncovered in tombs, placed beside the dead to sustain them on their journey. Sometimes these vessels contained cacao, pulque, or maize-based drinks, not merely nourishment, but sacred substances tied to fertility, abundance, and divine favor. To give water to the dead was to acknowledge that their journey required sustenance, just as the living body required food and drink in daily life. The natural sinkholes of the Yucatan were especially revered as portals. These pools, often leading into vast underground rivers, were seen as entrances into the underworld itself. Offerings cast into them included jade beads, gold ornaments, and even human lives, given in devotion to Chok, the rain god. The still, deep waters of the cenotes mirrored the mysteries of life and death. To gaze into their surface was to look into the threshold between realms. Cleansing rituals with water also formed part of the living connection to the afterlife. Before important ceremonies, participants bathed in rivers or washed their hands and faces with sacred water. This was not simply about physical purity, but about aligning the body and spirit with cosmic order. Water carried away not only dirt, but spiritual heaviness, preparing both priest and commoner to approach the divine with clarity. In this way, the daily act of washing carried echoes of the eternal transition, reminding every person that their soul, too, would one day be carried across unseen rivers. The symbolic connection between water and rebirth extended into agricultural rites as well. Rain was not only necessary for crops, but was also tied to the renewal of human life. When rains failed, Drought was not seen as a natural cycle alone, but as a rupture in the harmony between humans and the gods. Ceremonies at rivers, lakes, and cenotes sought to restore this balance, pleading for water to flow again, just as the soul needed rivers to pass into the afterlife. So too did the living community need rivers to continue its life on earth. The acoustics of flowing water, like the echoes of caves, were also imbued with spiritual meaning. The sound of a river at night, or the drip of water in an underground chamber, was heard as a voice, a message from the underworld or from the gods who dwelt there. To sit beside a river was not only to rest, but to listen, to open oneself to the murmurs of eternity carried in the current. Reflection emerges naturally here. Perhaps the Maya sensed something we still feel when we stand by a river, watching its slow, unbroken movement. There is a comfort in its continuity, in the knowledge that the water before us is ancient, flowing through countless cycles of evaporation, rain, and stream. Did they see, as we sometimes do, that rivers are metaphors for time itself, always moving, never stopping, yet always returning? In funerary belief, rivers also acted as guides. Some traditions suggest that the soul had to cross waters guarded by spirits, and the offerings buried with the dead may have been tokens to ensure safe passage. A bead of jade, a vessel of maize, or a drop of sacred water could all serve as currency, not in a literal sense, but as signs of devotion and readiness. By giving water to the soul, the living expressed faith that the journey would continue without obstruction. The Maya imagination of rivers aligns with a wider pattern seen across cultures. In Greek belief, the dead crossed the river Styx. In Hindu tradition, the Ganges is revered as a purifier, carrying the ashes of the departed toward liberation. The Maya vision of rivers joins this universal recognition that water connects the worlds, dissolving the boundaries between life and death. Perhaps this shared symbolism reflects something deeper in human awareness, that water, always flowing, always changing, mirrors the passage of our own existence. When the Maya poured water over a grave, or offered a vessel into the depths of a cenote, they were not only caring for the soul of the deceased, they were affirming a truth about themselves, that all are part of the same flow, all carried along by forces greater than any single life. To honor water was to honor the mystery of passage itself. Imagine now a river at twilight. The air is still. The current moves slowly, carrying with it reflections of the fading sky. For the Maya, such a vision was more than beautiful. It was a reminder of destiny. Each of us, like the river, moves steadily toward a vast unknown. Each ripple is a moment of life. Each turn of the current is a change, a transition, an offering of movement back into the great cycle. In the end, the Maya saw water as both companion and guide. It cleansed, it nourished, it connected, and it carried. It was the bridge between the body and the soul, between the living and the departed, between this world and the next. And so, to rest beside water, to hear its flow, to feel its coolness, to sense its endless journey, is to come close to the same truth that comforted the Maya, that life is not a fixed point, but a current, that death is not an end, but a passage, and that somewhere beyond sight, the river continues on. Chapter 17. Time and Eternity in Mayan Belief for the Ancient Maya. Time was never a simple sequence of days passing in a line. It was sacred. It was alive. Time itself was a divine fabric, woven by gods and sustained through human ritual. Every cycle of the sun, every movement of the moon. Every turning of the calendar was part of a greater pattern, a spiral of endings and renewals that bound existence together. The Maya lived within this spiral, never outside of it. Time was not abstract to them, not something counted only for record or convenience. Instead, it was a force to be honored, measured, and respected. It shaped their understanding of life, their vision of the afterlife, and their belief that eternity was not far away, but present within the cycles of every moment. One of the most striking expressions of this worldview is found in the Maya calendars. The Tizocan, a sacred 260-day calendar, intertwined with the 365-day Hob solar calendar to create the calendar round, a cycle lasting 52 years before repeating. This was no mere system of counting days. It was a cosmic rhythm. Each day carried its own identity, its own spiritual essence, believed to influence the lives of those born beneath it. Time itself had personality and power. Beyond this, the long count calendar stretched across vast expanses, tracking epochs that lasted thousands of years. It placed human life within a cosmic frame, reminding the Maya that their days were but threads in an immense tapestry of divine creation. To live with this awareness was to sense that one's life was not isolated, but part of something far greater. For the Maya, death did not remove the soul from time. Instead, the afterlife was woven directly into these cycles. The descent into Xibalba, the trials endured, the eventual transformation, all of it reflected the same rhythm seen in the rising and setting of the sun, the waxing and waning of the moon, the planting and harvesting of maize. The soul's journey was not outside of time, but an echo of it. In many ways, this vision brought comfort. If time was eternal, then death was not a rupture, but a continuation. The end of one cycle was the beginning of another. Just as maize seed was buried in the soil only to rise again in green shoots, so too the human soul was believed to pass through darkness into renewal. Death was not final disappearance, but a necessary moment within the greater spiral. Rituals reflected this belief. Ceremonies tied to the turning of the calendar often included prayers for the dead, weaving the memory of ancestors into the present moment. Time itself was the bridge between the living and the departed. To observe a sacred day was not only to honor the gods, but to stand in harmony with those who had gone before. In the turning of the calendar, ancestors lived again. This cyclical understanding also shaped their architecture. At sites such as Chichen Itza, Tikal, and Copan, temples and observatories were aligned with celestial events, the equinox, the solstice, the movements of Venus, when the sun rose and cast its light along the steps of a pyramid in perfect alignment. It was not only an astronomical event, it was a sacred reminder that human life was intertwined with eternal rhythms. Time, marked in stone and shadow, became visible, tangible, and holy. And yet, this sacredness of time was not entirely fixed. It was also fragile. The Maya believed that time required maintenance, that rituals and offerings were necessary to keep the cycles in harmony. If humans failed to honor the gods, the balance of time itself could falter, bringing drought, famine, or misfortune. In this sense, time was both eternal and vulnerable, infinite and yet dependent on human devotion. One might pause here to wonder, how did it feel to live with such a sense of time? To wake each day not merely aware of the hours ahead, but of the sacred qualities woven into that specific day. Did it bring comfort to know that one's life had meaning within cycles that stretched across millennia? Or did it bring a kind of pressure, the weight of knowing that neglecting ritual could unsettle the very fabric of existence. For the Maya, however, this was not a burden but a responsibility, one shared collectively. Priests carefully kept track of calendars, performing ceremonies to mark transitions. Farmers planted and harvested in harmony with the cycle of the sun and stars. Families observed the anniversaries of their dead, returning memory into the flow of the present. In this way, the living continually wove themselves into the greater spiral of time. Eternity, then, was not a distant promise. It was already here, felt in the rhythm of days, moons, and seasons. The afterlife was not separate from time, but enfolded within it. Xibalba itself was part of this spiral, a descent and an ascent, a pattern of loss and renewal mirrored in every sunrise. This view of time also shaped Mayan prophecy. Because time repeated in cycles, what had happened before was believed to echo again. The past was not gone. It was folded into the present and future. Histories were not merely remembered, but relived, each cycle carrying traces of what had come before. In this way, eternity was not an infinite stretch of new events, but an eternal return, a continual reweaving of patterns. Modern readers sometimes misunderstand this, imagining it as fatalism, a belief that all events repeat exactly, with no freedom or change. But the Maya did not see cycles as identical repetition. Instead, they were layers. The same energies returned, the same sacred days recurred, but how humans engaged with them could vary. Time offered opportunities for harmony, for renewal, and for correcting imbalance. In this sense, eternity was not static, but alive. To consider this perspective is to glimpse another way of seeing existence. In much of the modern world, time is seen as linear, a line stretching from past to future, from beginning to end. But for the Maya, time was not a line. It was a spiral, turning ever onward, looping back upon itself, yet always carrying life forward. What we call endings, they called transitions. What we fear as final, they saw as necessary steps in an endless rhythm. Perhaps this is why their myths place such emphasis on death and rebirth. The hero twins, who died and rose again, were not exceptions, but reflections of a deeper truth, that all beings, all days, all seasons, follow this same eternal pattern. The afterlife, then, was not separate from life, but another turning in the spiral of time. Even today, in Maya-descended communities, time continues to be observed through ritual calendars, through prayers tied to sacred days, through cycles of planting and harvest. Though centuries have passed, the spiral remains. To honor time is to honor eternity itself. And so, when one reflects on Mayan belief, a gentle insight emerges. Eternity is not elsewhere. It is not locked in some distant realm beyond death. It is here, woven into every sunrise, every passing season, every return of the stars. To live with awareness of this rhythm is to live already in eternity. Imagine for a moment your own days as part of such a spiral. Each morning not only a beginning, but a return. Each evening not an end, but a passage. Your life not a line disappearing into darkness, but a thread woven into a tapestry without end. Does this bring comfort? Or does it stir deeper wonder? The realization that perhaps time itself is the truest afterlife, always carrying us, always renewing us, always returning us to the eternal. The Maya believed that eternity was not apart from time, but folded within it. In their view, every moment carried the presence of the eternal. And so they lived, and so they died, within a spiral that never ceased turning. Chapter 18. Sacred animals as guides of the soul for the Maya. Animals were not merely companions in the forests and fields. They were bridges between the human and the divine, the earthly and the spiritual. To look upon the jaguar, the deer, or the hummingbird was to see more than a creature of fur or feather. It was to glimpse a guide, a living symbol of the soul's path through life, death, and transformation. Maya belief was shaped by an intimate relationship with nature. In the dense jungles and along the rivers of their world, animals were constant presences, their movements reflecting rhythms of mystery and power. This closeness gave rise to a vision in which animals were never separate from humans. Instead, they were woven into the very fabric of spiritual identity. One expression of this belief is the concept of the way, sometimes described as an animal spirit companion or coessence. From birth, each person was thought to be bound to an animal counterpart, sharing in its strengths, its instincts, and even its fate. If the animal thrived, the person too would prosper. If the animal was injured, the human might suffer illness or misfortune. In this way, life was not lived alone. Each soul moved forward with an unseen companion beside it. The jaguar held, perhaps, the deepest and most fearsome place in this spiritual world. To the Maya, the jaguar was a creature of the night, a lord of the underworld, yet also a protector of kings and shamans. Its spotted coat was seen as a mirror of the stars, linking earth to the heavens. The jaguar could walk between worlds, hunting in darkness, moving unseen. For those who sought to understand the afterlife, the jaguar was both guide and guardian, leading souls through the shadowed forests of Xibalba. And yet, the jaguar was not only a creature of terror, it was a symbol of rebirth. Just as the sun descended into darkness and returned with the dawn, so too the jaguar embodied the power of descent and return. Shamans who took on jaguar spirit in ritual were believed capable of traversing realms beyond the ordinary, ensuring that balance was kept between the living and the dead. To follow the jaguar, in vision or in myth, was to accept both the danger of shadow and the promise of renewal. The deer, by contrast, carried a gentler symbolism. Moving with quiet grace through the forests and clearings, the deer represented innocence, sacrifice, and nourishment. Deer were vital in ritual offerings, their lives given as a gift to the gods. In myths, the deer often appeared as a symbol of the hunted soul, pursued yet carrying dignity in its steps. For the Maya, the deer was also linked to fertility and abundance, its presence reminding people of the delicate balance between taking life and sustaining it. In funerary contexts, deer could represent the vulnerability of the soul, crossing into new realms. To see the deer was to be reminded of life's fragility, and yet also its beauty. Its role as a spiritual guide was not through strength, like the jaguar, but through quiet surrender, teaching that the path forward sometimes requires gentleness and acceptance. The hummingbird carried yet another layer of meaning, one tied to lightness and transformation. With wings that beat so rapidly they seemed to shimmer, the hummingbird was seen as a messenger between worlds. It was believed that the spirits of fallen warriors might return in the form of hummingbirds, drinking nectar, living among blossoms, reminding the living of courage and sacrifice. Small though it was, the hummingbird symbolized persistence and vitality. In some traditions, it was thought to carry prayers to the gods, darting quickly from one realm to another. As a guide for the soul, the hummingbird embodied swiftness, reminding the Maya that the journey between life and death was not always slow or heavy. Sometimes the crossing was light, graceful, even joyful, as if carried on delicate wings together. These animals reflected the breadth of human experience and its echoes in the afterlife. The jaguar taught strength in darkness. The deer revealed the beauty of sacrifice and the peace of acceptance. The hummingbird carried hope, speed, and renewal. Each was earthly, rooted in the forests, rivers, and skies of the Maya world. Yet each was also divine, carrying within it a path for the human soul. It is worth asking, how might it have felt to live with this vision? To walk through the jungle and see not only animals, but guides, companions, protectors, and messengers. To know that the rustle in the undergrowth, the shadow on the path, or the flash of wings was more than coincidence. It was a presence woven into one's fate. For the Maya, this awareness must have filled the world with both comfort and caution. The boundary between human and animal was never sharp. It was porous, shifting, alive. This belief also reinforced the sense that the natural world was sacred. To harm an animal carelessly was not only to disrupt the balance of nature, but potentially to wound a soul. Ritual offerings often included the careful sacrifice of animals, yet even in sacrifice there was reverence. Life was never taken lightly, for each creature carried spiritual weight in art and hieroglyphs. Animals appear frequently alongside gods and rulers, often as symbols of their powers. A king might be shown with jaguar markings, a sign of his strength and his authority over both earthly and spiritual realms. Shamans, in trance, were depicted transforming into animals, blurring the line between human and beast. These depictions remind us that the Maya did not see animals as separate or lesser. They were essential allies in the journey of existence. Even today, traces of these beliefs endure. In some Maya-descended communities, animal spirits are still honored as protectors and guides. Dreams of animals are considered significant, revealing messages about health, destiny, or spiritual needs. The presence of a certain bird, the crossing of a deer, or the call of a jaguar can still be understood as signs that the invisible world is near. When viewed in this way, death too becomes less lonely. For if animals are guides of the soul, then no one passes into the afterlife without companions. The jaguar waits at the forest's edge. The deer moves softly ahead. The hummingbird circles with light. Each presence assures the soul that it does not journey alone, that the path, however mysterious, is always shared. And so, the Maya vision of sacred animals reminds us of something deeper, that the world around us is alive with meaning, that every step in the jungle, every sound of wings, every shadow in the night might be a sign of guidance. And perhaps it suggests a gentle truth for us as well, that even in the most uncertain transitions, there are guides beside us, whether we see them or not. Imagine now the quiet steps of the deer in a moonlit clearing, the soft, powerful stride of the jaguar vanishing into the trees, the glimmer of a hummingbird at dawn. Do you feel them near? The Maya believed that such presences walk with us always, leading us gently forward, even when we do not know the path. Chapter 19. The calendar as map of the afterlife for the ancient Maya. Time was never simply a sequence of days and nights. It was a living force, a sacred fabric woven by gods and maintained through ritual. Their calendar systems, carved into stone and preserved in painted codices, were more than instruments of measurement. They were mirrors of the cosmos, charts of destiny, and guides for the soul's passage beyond death. The Maya developed one of the most sophisticated systems of timekeeping in the ancient world. At its heart were two interlocking calendars, the Hob, a solar calendar of 365 days, and the Tizocan, a sacred count of 260 days. Together, they formed the calendar round, a repeating cycle of 52 years. Beyond these, the Maya tracked the long count, a vast span of time that reached back to the mythical creation of the world and extended far into the future. Each calendar carried its own rhythm and meaning. The Hob, with its 18 months of 20 days each and a short period of 5 nameless days, reflected the agricultural cycle. It tied human life to the turning of the seasons, the planting and harvesting of maize, the rising of rivers, and the shifting of the sun across the sky. The Tizocan, by contrast, was rooted in the sacred. Its 260-day cycle, composed of 20 named days combined with numbers 1 through 13, was used to determine spiritual destinies, ritual events, and the paths of the soul. To be born on a particular day was not a matter of chance. It was a sign, inscribed in cosmic order, of the gifts and challenges one would carry through life. Priests, known as daykeepers, interpreted these signs, helping families understand the essence of a child's spirit. In this way, every person was not only an individual, but also a reflection of cosmic time, a life aligned with the great rhythms of creation. But the calendar did more than order life. It also shaped the Maya vision of death and the afterlife. Each cycle, whether of the sun, the moon, or the sacred count, suggested that time was not linear, but circular. Death was not an end, but a return, a passage into another turning of the wheel. The calendar offered assurance that nothing fell into silence forever. What left would one day return in funerary rituals. This belief was reflected in offerings and inscriptions. Dates were carefully recorded, not simply as moments of passing, but as markers in the cosmic order. To die on a particular day carried meaning, shaping the journey of the soul. A death aligned with certain sacred days could be seen as auspicious, granting smoother passage into the realms of the afterlife. The Tzocan was especially important here. Its 260-day cycle may have been inspired by the length of human gestation, linking the mystery of birth to the rhythm of cosmic time. Just as life entered the world in accordance with this sacred count, so too it departed under its guidance. The afterlife was not a realm apart, but part of the same rhythm that governed conception, growth, and rebirth. The long count, stretching across vast epochs, gave the Maya a sense of cosmic destiny. Each backturn, a period of roughly 394 years, was understood as part of a greater cycle of creation and destruction. Human lives were small within these spans, yet never insignificant. Each person's birth and death were threads within the larger weaving of time. To live and to die was to take part in a story written across ages. It is striking to consider how this vision shaped daily life. Imagine waking each morning not only to the rising sun, but to a knowledge of where you stood in sacred time. Imagine knowing that your actions, your rituals, even your moments of silence, were part of an unfolding cosmic order. To the Maya, such awareness offered both responsibility and comfort. Life was not random. It was aligned with patterns written in the heavens. This sense of order also touched the governance of kingdoms. Rulers timed their ceremonies, wars, and dedications to the turning of calendars. By aligning human events with cosmic cycles, they affirmed their legitimacy and their connection to the divine. A king was not merely a political figure, but a mediator of time, ensuring that human life remained in harmony with cosmic order. The calendar also gave rhythm to rituals of renewal. The completion of a calendar round every 52 years was marked with ceremonies of fire, purification, and offering. These moments reminded the Maya that cycles repeat, but also that each return brings renewal. Just as the sun rises each day yet brings new light, so too cycles of time bring both continuity and transformation in this way. The calendar became a map of the afterlife. The soul's journey was imagined not as a straight road, but as movement within cycles, cycles of days, seasons, and cosmic eras. Death was one crossing, birth another. Just as the sun set and rose, just as maize withered and sprouted anew, so too did the soul pass through darkness into renewed light. There is something deeply reassuring in this vision. For the Maya, to rest in death was not to vanish into an abyss. It was to enter another part of the great rhythm, to step into a turning that continued beyond human sight. Just as a date carved into stone is never lost, only carried forward into new cycles, so too the soul was never extinguished. It moved with time itself, eternal and unbroken. And yet, one must also wonder, did this belief bring comfort or weight? To know that one's destiny was written in the turning of sacred numbers, that birth and death alike were marked in cosmic patterns, did it free the spirit from fear, or did it bind it with inevitability? Perhaps the answer is both. The calendar was at once a promise of harmony and a reminder of order beyond human control. Still, the Maya vision of time reveals a profound insight, that life and death are not solitary events, but part of something larger, that every heartbeat, every ritual, every passing of the sun is connected to a rhythm written in the stars. In this rhythm, nothing is wasted, nothing forgotten. All things return. All things find their place again. So rest in this thought, that for the Maya, the calendar was more than a measure of days. It was a guide for the soul, a map of eternity, a reminder that in cycles of harmony, nothing truly ends. The turning of time carries all forward, softly, endlessly, into renewal. Chapter 20. The Silence of Night Rituals. When the sun sank beyond the horizon and shadows spread across the land, the Maya believed the world shifted into a different state of being. Night was not merely darkness. It was a sacred threshold, a time when boundaries between the human world and the unseen grew thin. While the day belonged to planting, ruling, and building, the night belonged to silence, prayer, and communion in the Maya worldview. Night was charged with both danger and possibility. It was the realm of spirits, ancestors, and gods who moved unseen through forests and villages. It was also the domain of celestial powers. The stars, appearing in patterns across the sky, were viewed as guides, deities, or even ancestors themselves. To gaze upward at the constellations was to read messages, written in eternal light. Night rituals were often performed with great care. Fires were lit, not in roaring strength, but in low, steady flames. The flicker of light served as both protection and invitation, a beacon to guide spirits while warding off those who might bring harm. Around these fires, families and priests offered prayers, burned incense, and set food or drink aside as gifts for the unseen. Incense, usually made from resin such as copal, was particularly important. Its smoke rose in delicate streams, curling upward toward the sky. To the Maya, this was not mere fragrance. It was prayer made visible, a bridge between earth and heaven. As the smoke drifted into the night air, it carried the intentions of the living to ancestors and gods. In this way, silence was not empty. It was filled with the soft sound of burning, the scent of resin, and the unseen movement of prayers. Rituals held at night often involved music, but not the loud, festive rhythms of daytime ceremonies. Instead, there were slower beats of drums, soft notes of flutes, and chants that rose and fell like waves. These sounds carried through the stillness, echoing against temples and trees, marking sacred time. The rhythm of music guided participants into a state of focus, aligning them with the unseen presences they sought to reach. Priests, known as ajkij or daykeepers, were central in these ceremonies. They knew the sacred calendars, the proper offerings, and the right words to speak. At night, their role deepened. They became mediators between two realms, guiding communities in acts of remembrance and devotion. Some rituals were communal, performed in plazas or temple courtyards. Others were intimate, held within homes, where families whispered names of ancestors into the night. The night was also a time of divination. The stars and the movement of planets were studied carefully. Priests traced the arcs of Venus, watched for eclipses, and listened for omens carried by owls or other nocturnal animals. The silence of night was never truly silent. Every rustle, every cry, every flicker of flame was a sign that might carry meaning. For the Maya, reading these signs was not superstition but a way of understanding their place within the cosmos. In funerary practices, night held special importance. The passage of the soul was imagined as a journey through darkness, and rituals performed after sunset helped guide the dead across thresholds. Offerings of food, water, and sacred objects were left to ease this passage, while chants and prayers sought to light the way. The night thus became not only a time of remembrance, but also a space of accompaniment, where the living walked alongside the departed in spirit. To reflect on this, one might imagine the quiet of a Maya village under the stars, the fires glowing softly, the faint hum of chanting carried through the air, the warmth of copal smoke rising. In such a setting, silence was not absence. It was presence, a presence filled with unseen listeners, ancestors, gods, and forces that moved quietly between worlds. There is something profound in the idea that the most sacred moments were not always loud or dramatic, but often still and quiet. The Maya recognized that silence could be as powerful as words, that a whisper could reach where a shout could not. In the stillness of night, human voices softened, allowing the voice of the cosmos to be heard. Yet one must wonder, how did they experience this silence? Was it comforting, like the embrace of ancestors, or was it heavy, filled with the weight of unseen powers? Perhaps it was both, a silence that invited trust, but also demanded reverence. To sit by the fire, to gaze into the night sky, was to open oneself to mysteries larger than any human life. This rhythm of night rituals reminds us that time itself carried sacred qualities. Day was for labor and light, night for reflection and communion. In this balance, the Maya found harmony. To live fully required not only activity, but also stillness. Not only sunlight, but also starlight. Their practices also reveal a deep understanding of human need. Night is when fears often rise. Darkness brings uncertainty. Yet the Maya met this uncertainty with ritual, with prayer, with connection. Instead of seeing night as a void, they transformed it into a time of closeness with the divine. Through firelight and smoke, they gave form to the unseen. Through silence, they made space for the sacred dot in the end. The silence of night rituals was more than a pause in the day's activities. It was a reminder that there are truths that cannot be spoken in noise, that there are presences felt only in stillness. For the Maya, to honor night was to honor mystery itself, the mystery of life, death, and all that lies beyond. So rest gently in this thought, that silence itself can be a prayer, that in the quiet hours of night, when fires burn low and stars shine above, one might feel closest to the eternal. Chapter 21. The promise of rebirth. To the Maya, death was never the end. It was a passage, a transformation, and above all, a promise. They believed that all of life moved in cycles. Seeds fell into the ground, disappeared into darkness, and returned in the greenness of new shoots. The sun sank each evening, yet returned with dawn. Rain vanished into soil, only to rise again as crops and rivers. So too, the human soul was seen as part of this rhythm, woven into the turning of existence itself. Rebirth was not merely about the continuation of the body. It was cosmic. A soul, upon death, did not fade into silence, but entered into the deep turning of the universe. From darkness, renewal was born, just as maize, the sacred corn, sprouted from buried kernels. So too did human life return, in forms both visible and unseen. The Maya understood this truth most vividly through agriculture. The maize plant was their life, their sustenance, and their sacred story. In the Popol Vuh, the great creation text of the Quraysh Maya, humans were fashioned from maize dough. Yellow corn and white corn gave flesh and blood to humanity. To plant corn was not only to feed families, but to participate in the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. Each seed buried was like a body laid to rest. Each stalk that rose a sign that life always follows loss. This belief shaped the way they imagined the afterlife. Death was not feared as final. It was the soil in which new existence took root. The underworld, Xibalba, was not only a realm of trials but also a place of gestation. Souls endured journeys through its shadows, yet from those shadows came renewal. Darkness was not an end, but a necessary passage toward light. Rebirth could take many forms. For some, it meant return in human life, a continuation of lineage and family. For others, it meant transformation into forces of nature, a bird, a flower, or even a star. The Maya looked at the night sky and believed it was filled with ancestors reborn as lights. To watch the stars move across the heavens was to witness renewal, written in celestial form. Ceremonies reinforced this promise. Rites of burial often included objects linked to growth and regeneration, jade beads, maize kernels, or vessels filled with food and drink. These were not only offerings to sustain the dead, but symbols of new beginnings. Jade, with its green brilliance, was a stone of life and continuity. Maize kernels, tucked beside the departed, were seeds of return. Rituals of renewal were also tied to the calendar. The Maya calendar did not simply mark days. It was a map of cycles, endlessly turning. Festivals and ceremonies often coincided with transitions of time, the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. To celebrate renewal in the calendar was to affirm that death itself was folded into a greater rhythm of return. The promise of rebirth extended beyond individuals. It touched entire communities. When rulers died, their successors often performed ceremonies, not only of mourning but of renewal. The death of a king was likened to the setting of the sun, and the enthronement of the next ruler to the rising of dawn. In this way, political and spiritual continuity were united in the pattern of rebirth. Yet this vision was not only collective, it was deeply personal. Families believed their ancestors remained close, guiding them in dreams and rituals. Children were sometimes named after grandparents, believed to carry their spirit forward. In these ways, rebirth was not only about cosmic cycles, but about the quiet renewal of family lines, memory, and love. When we reflect on this, we may wonder, what did it feel like for the Maya to live within this promise? To bury their dead not in despair, but in hope. To look at a seed and see in it a reflection of their own destiny. Perhaps there was comfort in knowing that nothing was ever lost, that each ending was a hidden beginning. Even the great cosmic struggles in Maya mythology reflected this truth. The hero twins of the Popol Vuh, Hunahpu and Xibalba, descended into Xibalba, endured trials, and faced death itself. Yet they returned, reborn, and transformed into celestial bodies. Their story was not one of defeat, but of victory through renewal. In their myth, the Maya found assurance that life rises from death, light from darkness. The cycles of the natural world reinforced this promise daily. The rising and setting of the sun, the phases of the moon, waxing and waning, the turning of seasons, each bringing death and renewal in endless sequence. For the Maya, these were not metaphors. They were living proof that rebirth was woven into the fabric of reality, even today. In Maya communities that continue ancient traditions, this promise is remembered. Rituals at planting and harvest, prayers for ancestors, and ceremonies of renewal all reflect the same deep trust that life continues. That cycles turn, that death gives way to rebirth. There is a quiet wisdom in this vision. It reminds us that endings may not be absolute, that what falls into darkness may yet rise again in light. Perhaps that is why the Maya could face death with reverence, but not despair. For them, it was not an enemy, but a teacher, a reminder of the greater cycle in which all beings are carried. And so, the promise of rebirth endures. In the silence of burial mounds, in the greenness of maize fields, in the shimmering of stars, the Maya found signs that life always begins again. Death was the soil, rebirth the flower. Darkness was the passage, light the destination. Rest now in this thought, that within every ending lies a beginning. That renewal is not only possible, but inevitable. That you too are part of this eternal cycle, a thread in the endless weaving of life, death, and rebirth. Chapter 22. The Serene Cosmic Order of the Maya. For the Maya, the world was never fragmented. It was whole, balanced, and deeply connected. Every belief of gods and ancestors, of the heavens above and the underworld below, of rivers and caves, of stars and seeds, all belonged to a single vision. This vision was one of harmony, where life and afterlife were not two separate realms, but threads of the same eternal fabric. To live was to walk within that cosmic weave, and to die was to pass into another pattern of its design. The serene order they imagined did not deny the presence of struggle or suffering. Darkness and trial existed, but never in isolation. Every shadow was paired with light, every descent with the possibility of ascent. The underworld, Xibalba, was not only a place of testing, but also of transformation. The heavens above were not only luminous realms of reward, but stages in the greater balance of the soul's journey. Even the earth itself was not a middle ground between two extremes, but the living center of this vast design. This cosmic order was sustained through cycles. The Maya understood existence not as a straight line, but as a turning spiral. The calendar captured this truth, repeating sacred numbers, aligning human time with celestial rhythms. Each day carried meaning, each cycle echoed eternity. A birth was not random. A death was not accidental. Both were inscribed in the wider harmony of the universe. Through ritual, humans participated in this order. Offerings of maize, incense, or jade were not simple acts of devotion. They were gestures that acknowledged the unity of the whole. A prayer at a cave mouth was a bridge between living families and the ancestors who dwelled close in spirit. A ceremony timed with the solstice was not only an agricultural necessity, but a statement that human life followed the same rhythms as sun and season. In this way, ritual was less about asking for favor and more about maintaining balance. The invisible threads that tied the living world to the unseen. The serene order was also written in myth. In the Popol Vuh, creation was not a single moment but a sequence of attempts, refinements, and renewals. Humanity itself was born through cycles of trial. The gods first shaped people from mud, then from wood, and finally from the sacred maze that defined them. This progression reflected the same cosmic truth, that perfection was not found in permanence, but in renewal. That life emerged through patterns, each failure leading toward harmony. The hero twins, Hunahpu and Xibalba, mirrored this vision in their journey through Xibalba. They faced trials, they faced death, yet returned as the sun and the moon. Their myth was not merely a tale of courage. It was a reflection of the cosmic pattern itself. Light and shadow, life and death, struggle and renewal, all moving together in a serene balance. For the Maya, this was not simply a story to be told, but a truth to be lived. Even the architecture of Maya cities reflected the cosmic order. Temples were aligned with solstices and equinoxes, their stairways designed so that shadows revealed sacred symbols during key times of year. Pyramids rose as earthly mountains, linking the human world to the divine heavens. Caves beneath them served as sacred entrances to the underworld. A city was not only a place of living, but a map of the cosmos. To walk its plazas was to move through a world already aligned with eternity. The serene order extended into the realm of ancestors. Death did not erase the bonds of family. The departed remained present, guiding and protecting the living. Rituals at household shrines, offerings of food, and the quiet whisper of prayers kept these connections alive. The family was not only made of those who breathed, but of those who had passed into the next stage of the cycle. In this way, every household was its own reflection of the larger cosmic unity. At the heart of this vision lay acceptance. The Maya did not seek to escape death, nor to defeat it. Death was woven into the pattern, necessary and sacred. It was soil to seed, shadow to light, silence to song. To live in harmony meant not to resist the cycles, but to trust them. Peace came not from denial, but from embrace. And yet, one cannot help but wonder, what did it feel like to live within this vision? To rise each morning knowing that your steps, your breath, even your struggles, were part of a vast design. Perhaps there was comfort in knowing that nothing stood alone, that all things, joys and sorrows alike, belonged to a larger harmony. Did they feel, in the hush of night rituals or the blaze of temple fires, that they were held within a serene order greater than themselves? This cosmic harmony was not an abstract philosophy. It touched every part of Maya life. Agriculture, politics, family, ritual, and death all followed the same sacred weave. A king's death was a sunset, his successor's enthronement a sunrise. A field left fallow was a necessary rest so that fertility might return. A drought was not chaos, but part of a cycle that would one day turn toward abundance. The serene order was always present, even when its rhythms were hidden. For the Maya, the universe was not fragile. It was whole. It could endure endings, because every ending was already folded into the greater turning. It could hold suffering, because suffering itself was a passage toward renewal. In this truth, they found peace. Modern eyes may see in this belief a kind of wisdom that still speaks today. To know that life is not wasted, that death is not destruction, that the cosmos itself moves with balance. This is a perspective that softens fear. Perhaps that is why the Maya placed such care in their rituals, such reverence in their stories, such devotion in their timekeeping. Each act was a way of participating in the serene order, of aligning with the harmony that underlay all existence. And so, when death came, it was not an end. It was a passage into the same order, a movement into the unseen part of the same eternal fabric. Souls entered the underworld, journeyed through shadow, and rose into renewal. Ancestors remained present, stars bore witness, and the cycles continued. To reflect on this is to sit with a quiet truth. The Maya did not avoid death, nor did they fear it as destruction. Instead, they embraced it as part of the whole. The fabric of life and afterlife, of light and shadow, of seed and harvest, was seamless. Within that fabric, they found serenity. Rest. Then, in this closing truth, the Maya believed that peace comes not from resisting death, but from understanding its place in the great weave. To live is to move with the cycles. To die is to continue within them. All things, heavens, underworld, ancestors, rituals, the turning of stars and seasons, belong to one eternal order. And within that order, there is harmony.